we're also going to talk about revenue for next year. There's also the line-by-line budget for next year. It is on the web, and we're going to talk about the total budget of where we are right now in our first draft. The first for special education is A2250. That's the function code where you see it. If you want to look at the line-by-line budget, you see the description. Special education, our proposed budget is going up about $1 million, or about 5.26%. And it's important to note that this function includes both in-district and out-of-district special education programs. There will be one additional elementary special education class at Vito Elementary for next year. That's our plan based on annual reviews and student needs. But the number of district-wide elementary special education teachers will remain the same based on, again, annual reviews and some staff shifts. So we are increasing one special class at Vito, but the number of teachers that we'll need district-wide will be the same based on just some changes in student needs based on updated annual reviews. There will be 2 new ICT classes at West Elementary School, in addition to the classes that they have already at the school. And contrary to prior budget proposals and presentations, at this point in the first draft budget, the ARC grant-funded social worker position has been included in the 2024-25 draft budget. There will be 2 fewer special education teacher positions at the high school, again, based on annual review projections. The projected number of students who will attend BOCE's special education program, we're projecting 39 for next year. That's 3 more than the current year count. And the projected number of students who will be placed by the Committee on Special Education, or what we call the CSE, at private schools is 28, which is 3 more than the current year count. So if you look at those line items in the budget, you'll see that the funding in those codes is growing because the number of students who are going to these programs is increasing, and we need to fund that. Our first draft total budget number is an increase of about $4 million, or about 2.7%. That's where we are at this point in the process. And let's talk a little bit about revenue before we talk about revenue for next year. Okay, I want to give us a forecast on where we are in our revenue for the current year. If you take a look at the first column where it says original revenue projection, you'll see that the numbers of what we had said we would need when we did these presentations last year. You see our bottom line number, how we balance the current year budget of $151,631,248 in those various categories. State aid, the updated revenue forecast based on the projection that we received in January shows gaining about $33,000, which for these purposes is basically flat. Just a little bit more in some expenditure-based aids based on some updated information by the state. Now, again, this is for the current year. Other revenue, where this is the big change, I mentioned it last meeting, we're expecting about $1.8 million in additional revenue. Most of that comes from the interest income that was somewhat unexpected, and we didn't realize or think that interest rates would stay as high as they are. What that does for us as a district is the funds that we have in our bank accounts are earning interest of about 5%, and it brings in more interest income. So you see a big difference there for our forecast for the end of this year. LIPA pilot, again, small increase because we never really know how much LIPA is going to give us. It fluctuates, but we are expecting about $78,000 more of revenue for the current year. Tax levy is the same, because as I said before, what we ask the community for is what we get. Doesn't make a difference if there are more people moving into the community, more houses being built. Whatever we ask for is what we get. It's all about how it's distributed, how this burden is distributed. So no change there, and the appropriated fund balance, what we said we were going to use from our fund balance, again, the same. So big news is that we hope to end the year with about $2 million of additional revenue based on mostly the interest income. Something else that's in here that we also received this year, a one-time payment of about $400,000 for COVID-19 costs. So we submitted some applications to FEMA to get some money back from FEMA based on our COVID-19 costs, and that money came in this year. Now let's talk about next year. So first, let me just go back for a minute to where we are in our budget process. So we're proposing a budget of roughly $155.7 million for next year. And how are we going to pay for that? So let's take a look at the optimistic revenue projection. You see those same categories as I had in the previous slide about revenue. State aid, what we're using here is the current level of foundation aid. I know there's been some talk about maybe a 3% increase. It's also not definite that we're going to get the same level of foundation aid. So I think to be conservative but be optimistic, I'm using that same level of foundation aid. And you see here a slight increase of about $351,000, which is basically some additional building aid. That's where you'll see the difference in some of the expenditure-based categories. Other revenue, you see I'm using the forecast for the current year, and you see a bit of a drop. We don't expect the interest to stay at the same level. I don't think that we're going to see over 5% of interest next year. We've consulted with our bankers, and I think it is going to drop a bit, not to where it was a couple of years ago. We were earning about 0.1% of interest, but I don't think it's going to stay at 5%. We're also not going to get that same one-time payment of about $400,000, so you see a slight drop in what we're projecting for next year. The LIPA pilot, again, it's unknown, but we took an average over the past several years in terms of some of the ups and downs, and that's what we're projecting for next year. The tax levy of an additional $2 million is based on a 1.9% increase on the current year, right? That's what was asked of us from the board to go down to 1.9%, and that represents 1.9%, about $2 million of additional tax levy. And the appropriated fund balance, just to make things balance, where we are in the budget process right now, basically the same level as where we are, a slight reduction of about rounding $136,000. I basically covered that and what's in the text there, but that's just for your review. What is in the proposed budget? The allocation to continue to operate East School through June 2025. The social worker funded through the ARC grant has been added back into the budget. We talked about it was part of a grant. We added it to the rollover number. When we were talking about reductions, we were taking it out, but we put that back in the proposed budget. Basically because we've been listening to what everyone's been saying, mostly from our special education educators, our school administrators, our PPS staff, that we really need that social worker to remain and to be added to the budget just because of the mental health needs that we have throughout the district. The 2 WINGS teachers, again, just to recap on that were funded through the ARC grant for the past few years. They're funded in the ARC grant this year, have been added, and they are included in the 2024-25 budget. All school assistant or vice principal positions are in next year's budget. This again is to clarify for everybody because there has been a lot of back and forth over the past several meetings, and we just wanted to be clear with everybody so everyone knew what is in this recent draft. All AIS teacher positions, all of the STEM and Spanish positions at the elementary school, they're all in the budget. LARC is in the budget. All permanent substitute teachers, all of the arts and education expenses through the BOCES line. The 5 assistant coaches that were reduced in a prior draft, they are in the budget. All district-funded field trips, including Frost Valley and Coleman Country Day Camp, are in the current version of next year's budget. That's what we have for this evening. Now is the time for questions and comments from the board, please. Thank you. Would anyone like to ask a question?
I do have one quick question, Michael. Thank you. First of all, my question is it's the page about the FEMA payment. But before I do that, I want to say, I feel it's important to acknowledge you and the administration and just say thank you. I've been reading a lot about districts all over Long Island that are in some pretty bad shape because of the money that they got from the COVID pandemic, all the things they did, and now the planning wasn't done appropriately, so they're in some fiscal trouble now. So I just wanted to make sure I said thank you for the job that you guys have done in maintaining all of our programs and keeping everything the way that it should and not putting us in a situation. So I just want to say that up front.
Thank you.
My question is regarding this one-time FEMA payment of the approximately $400,000. So is this related to anything? So when this money comes in, does it have to be spent on anything like learning loss, or so where does it go?
So basically, it's like a reimbursement. So we had to submit an application based on expenditures that we had through FEMA, through COVID, and this is what was available to us. It goes in our general fund. And it's basically a way of recouping, to some degree, some of the additional costs that we had during the COVID pandemic.
Okay, and I just wanted to say thank you for clarifying everything about what's actually in the budget, what we put back, because I know there has been a lot of back and forth for the community, so I think this made it very clear. So thank you so much. Those
Thank
are
you.
my only questions.
Mr. DeVito, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
So I like how you said that everything was really based on student need. And you also stated that you work collaboratively with our special education department to get their input as well.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank our special education department for all of your thoughtfulness and putting into the work that you did for this presentation to help all of our students get what they need. I know it's not an easy job, so thank you for that. So Mr. DeVito, I know that you've always planned accordingly. And I know that a few weeks ago, we kind of like had the shock of what the governor had proposed. So are you sure that we can afford everything that is now back into the budget?
Well, again, I have an optimistic revenue projection. So based on what we're hearing from the state, they said that districts that were at risk of losing their foundation aid based on the governor's proposal, that's probably not where it's going to end up. We still don't know for sure. So I'm optimistic about that. I don't know if we'll know before our next board meeting, by April 16th, when we adopt the budget, but maybe we will. But at this point in time, this whole conversation has evolved over the past couple of months in terms of the information that we know. At this point, we feel comfortable using the current level of foundation aid in our state aid projections. It makes more sense to use it than to not use it. In terms of the other revenue, I feel very comfortable. We tried to be realistic, but a little conservative, right? So I don't think interest rates are going to remain high at 5%. I didn't drop it to 1%, but I kept it based on conversations with our banker in terms of a slight decline from where we are a little bit above 5% to tapering down to somewhere around 4%. So that shows a little bit of a reduction, but it still shows earning a nice amount of interest income. We also, another big driver of that other revenue category is the tuition we get from other districts, specifically Island Park. We are getting some more students from Island Park, so that's another specific revenue category that was able to increase because the number of students is growing. You never want to be in a situation where you don't have all the revenue that you expected to have at the end of the year. But I always try to be realistic, but conservative as well.
No, I thought it was really smart of you to include the revenue projection because you said that we do have some revenue coming in.
Yes.
So we have something that we use for our programs for all of our students. I was happy to see a lot of that you were able to put back into the budget. But we are missing the elementary enrichment program.
Right.
Is there any way possible where that program can be put back into the budget? I know Doc always says that these budgets are constantly fluid and what we say here tonight isn't always definite. But is there a possibility that we could add the the elementary enrichment program in? Just because it was such a vital program and so many of our students love the program and they really got a lot out of it.
So if that's a request from the board, we can certainly add that as an item of what's in the proposed budget for next year. But we do have to be prepared if we add that program, that number in terms of our total budget would go up by whatever the cost is of the enrichment program.
How many students went to the elementary enrichment program? About.
I think it's about 100. How much was it a semester? Or what's the number of elementary enrichment per semester?
We generally have about 800 students throughout the year.
Throughout the year, right, so about 800, throughout all 4 elementary schools.
Right, so substantial amount for children who get a lot out of the enrichment programs.
Yeah.
So I would like to see if there's a way that we can fit it into the budget, yes.
But again,
We have to.
it would make that proposed budget number go up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
One more comment, Mr. DeVito. I appreciate all the hard work that the buildings have put into this, that the administration has put into this. This year's budget season has been pretty erratic, probably more erratic budget season than from many of the past. We always do a way of being able to explain it clearly for all levels of people who know how to read complicated school budgets. So I appreciate you doing that. So the budget's essentially going to be a list of what we're going to maintain as priorities for this next year, and what we need to do is literally put together how it's going to integrate into the rest of future of the school years. So bringing back the programs, making sure that our staff is comfortable delivering those programs and the students are receiving the education is really important. So I thank you for clarifying things and also integrating those programs back into the budget.
Thank you.
Just quickly, thank you for this hard work. I know we've gone back and forth and back a million times trying to get into the budget what's best for our students, and I think we've done a really good job of listening to what we've said and what the public has said. And I'm really happy to see that some of the things that we talked about that we were worried about losing are now back on in the budget, and looks like they're going to stay there. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
As you can see, Mr. DeVito, we've already started in terms of budget cuts. We've cut one microphone on the table, so maybe next time it'll be two. I have a couple of questions, one concerning the both these 39 students. Are those full-time students?
Yes.
Yes, full-time?
I mean,
Yes, okay. Secondly, it's been pretty common knowledge, it's been talked about for a while in terms of the declining enrollments that's happened in the district for the last 10 or 15 years. Has there been a decline in special ed enrollments in that 10 years?
no.
No? Has it held constant? Has it increased?
It's gone up, not significantly, but it definitely has gone up, and we've seen a change in our out-of-district recommendations to increase. Say that again? I said that it has increased, not dramatically, but it has increased the amount of students that we are servicing out of district and have significantly increased over the last several years.
I guess I'd ask you the same question, Dr. Brancaccio, Ms. Guri. If you had to ask of us anything special in terms of a special request that you think your department would need that it doesn't have, is there anything? I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Beside building your own private day school without transportation for high school students.
I mean, looking at it from a student's perspective, if we look at all the students that are out of districts, quite honestly, if we could service those students in-house, that's where we want to be. We've increased our programming in-house on our elementary level. Our high school is where, middle school and high school is where we're sending out students that have significant needs. That number has dramatically increased since the last 2 years. So if I were to say programming, not administrative support, not any of that, but programming, that's where we would be. And if we could look at alternative instruction for students from the PPS standpoint, absolutely, we should be looking at that.
I think it's sometimes perceived as a knock, but it should be perceived as a sort of a credit to your department. And oftentimes, the word on the street is that you people stay with students for a long time before you make that call to send them out of district. Is that a fair rap in terms of you, in terms of your department? So if that is the case, I just want to thank your department and the teachers, because I know it takes an enormous amount of strength and time and patience and hope to do that. So we certainly appreciate those efforts. A couple of questions on the overall budget. One is, I was just concerned about, we haven't talked about summer school. And I just want to know if, in terms of the expense of summer school, has that been considered? I know there's been a lot of talk about regions and regions credit 65 and in the paper, or whatever the Board of Regents is discussing. But is summer school, has it been considered in terms of keeping it on?
Sure, well, we've considered everything, Dr. Ryan, but, we still have between 150 and 200 students who make up credit at summer school every year. They're often some of our students with the biggest challenges, and while there is some talk about some of the regions maybe not being weighted as highly or having some flexibility with regions exams, that's certainly not the case right now. And, part of the reason that we've been so proud to get our graduation rate up to the high 90s is that we have opportunities for students to make up credit in summer school. And part of the reason we started a Twilight program this year to maybe catch some of the kids who are falling through the cracks in other ways. I think, we've had a few conversations about maybe looking at our alternative programs in a more holistic way and figuring out in this day and age where we know, chronic absenteeism is an issue rising across the country in school districts. Students are increasingly disengaging with school. Our mental health issues are increasing. How are we providing education for students so that we can reach every single student? And I think we've started to have some of these comprehensive conversations. Gets derailed when we think we're getting a $12 million budget cut in 1 year. But our team is certainly on board with that, and we'll look at all of our options to do that in the most efficient way possible, whether that's including summer school or a Twilight program or some combination of the two. But for now, we think it's still really important to run that.
Yeah, I just want to sort of tag along with something Mrs. Conway had said. I do think we need to make effort to look in this $151, $155 million budget concerning enrichment program. Because to me, that is a mental health program. When kids do this after school, although it's targeted as enrichment and academic intent, it does serve a mental health purpose as well. In terms of giving kids a place to go, giving them something to do that they kind of like. It's not reading and math that they do from 9 to 3, or it's reading and math in sort of a different way. So I'd really like, we might need to look at this again in terms of trying to squeeze up some of this money in terms of somehow coming up with some appropriations with it. And my last point concerns the social worker. I was a little bit surprised that it was put into the budget. I just want to caution us once again, we sort of made this plea 5, 6, 7 years ago that when we were going to hire social workers, we wanted to hire social workers who had drug and alcohol training. But that was going to be sort of quintessential in terms of that. We need that. That's a parameter that we really need to look at. And that's not to disparage the training of any social worker. But given the troubles that kids present today, that should be paramount in terms of that. I just want to, I recommend or remind Central Administration that when we do look at the social workers, that we keep that experiential piece uppermost in mind as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. DeVito. You're almost through. You've got one more presentation. You've been very patient and deliberate as always. And I also want to thank the special ed staff for showing up tonight, armed and ready to answer all the questions. Because we know it's not easy working with the most difficult and the most challenging, in terms of the kids who present. We all want to do what's best for them. But one thing we've learned is that there are limits. There are limits in terms of what we can do. And we can only do so much. We need the state to provide placements for these kids. We need the county to do more. But I honestly think you people are doing far and beyond what anybody could reasonably expect of you and your staff. So we recognize that. We understand the dilemmas that are before us. We know we're underfunded from the federal government as far as special ed is concerned. And we know that falls on the local taxpayer. But Long Beach has always been forefront in terms of that and very, very supportive. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Space, but thank you again for your hard work and your expertise and your patience and actually your love for the kids you work with. Thanks.
Thank you. That's a perfect bridge. I wanted to say, I would be remiss if I didn't address all of you. It's rare that I see all of you in the same room at the same time. And I just wanted to say I have a deep appreciation for everyone who works in this district. I want to make that clear, from anyone who, cleans the toilets to clears the snow to drive center buses, all of our teachers, all of our staff. But there's a very special place in my heart, obviously, for special education, being not only on board with education, a parent here for a very long time, but a parent to a child with special needs who is in this district. And I know better than anyone else the tremendous amount of time, energy, love, care, and emotion that you put into your jobs. And it cannot be expressed or understood unless you live it as either a parent or an educator, and you guys do go above and beyond. So I would have been remiss if I didn't address you and publicly say thank you for all your hard work and dedication. I don't see you often, we don't talk often anymore, thankfully, except for Ms. Whitfield, of course. But I very, very much appreciate your dedication to every single one of the students in this district, but especially our special ed students, so thank you.
Okay. Any organization announcements? Questions and comments from the public on tonight's agenda only? Just like to remind people, if you present, or if you ask, if it's your first time, if you just give your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to address any topic on tonight's agenda.
Is it working? Yeah. Heather Lancaster, 636 East Park. Since Dr. Ryan, you're asking everybody what they need, I'm going to speak on behalf of the theater department. So, it's a combination of the theater department and I don't know if it's possible with the woodworking department. Every year we do a show, a drama. Every year we do a musical. We rent props, we rent things. Maybe we can make it into a club, maybe make it part of it. But why can't our woodshop students, the ones who are on the advanced side, help us build our props? Not only that, but once our props and our sets are built, what do we do with them? So I am proposing to you, if you can find us a place on the grounds of the high school, not asking for money from the district at all, we will do a fundraising to get some sort of storage unit, like it's a shed, or I don't know what it is, we can speak about that further later, where we can store stuff for the music and the drama, maybe save a little bit of money every time we do a show. So, that is.
Thank you, great idea.
You're welcome.
I'd be remiss, generally we don't applaud at public meetings. I know people don't like that. We also don't boo. We have everybody out, they give their opinion in terms of that, whether you agree with them or not, but it kind of makes the meeting roll along, and it sort of is an established protocol that makes the meeting run more smoothly. So I'll just remind you of that, please.
Hi, Joanne Meyer, I'm from Michigan Street. The wood shop is fantastic. We had a 2-hour tour of all of technology. It was amazing. I echo the sentiment. They did a fantastic job fixing one of the props used in the show, so I would love to see them just building the props. That would be great. I also think they should sell their stuff in the school store. I know there's plenty of people working that store who love to sell stuff, so that would be a great partnership. I did go to the robotics. I was actually able to volunteer there for my job, and the STAR team was amazing. They need a banner with their logo on it, like all the other teams had. And I think we also really need to find a way to engage more female students. There's only one on the team, and I know it seems like Smithtown has several, and I talked to them at length about how they got more girls on their team, so that would be fantastic. Elementary enrichment. I mean, it's fantastic, and the number of students that participate. I understand Cross Valley is great, and so is Coleman, but maybe that should be a priority over those. And is there any thought to, I know we have our funding back, and we're vigilant on our money, but IB and AP fees at the high school level, so that our students can take advantage of those more advanced classes, even if they can't afford such, because they are so expensive. And I think that's everything.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kate Judge Patton, 233 West Fulton Street, and Dr. Ed, I'm going to speak to your question about wishes. That my daughter was on the crew team for 2 years, or the crew club, so it's not a team per se, and it was a phenomenal experience, and Coach Carson is just top shelf. He really is phenomenal with the students, and it was a great collaboration with Concept Fitness. And I've heard that it was not going to continue. I don't know if that's true or not. It is. Oh, I'm happy. So then I'm standing here to compliment the program. And hopefully it will become a team because it was a club. So if it could be varsity, I know that would really help the kids moving towards college as well. Because there are a lot of opportunities. So.
Thank you. You only get one wish.
Okay.
It was already granted.
Please.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Henson, 352 Grand Avenue, Brooklyn, New York. And I'm here regarding item 3B. I believe that's correct. And the individual involved, his parents are here also. Basically, there was an incident which occurred off of school grounds, and the individual who attends this school district is being punished for defending himself. As I said, the underlying is that the incident did not happen on school grounds, did not involve the person that attacked, if you want to use that word, the individual regarding that listed in 3B, he was minding his own business. And then it ended up, he had to protect himself. So in doing so, I really can't understand how the school is going to suspend or even considering suspending the young person for the remainder of the year. Now, I can understand a stern talking to, a stern, whatever other kind of consequences. But again, I'm coming from the point of view the incident did not occur on school grounds and did not affect any of the other students. So for him to be out of school since about, February 27th, up until this time, for again, him protecting himself, you know, that doesn't seem justified to us, not at all. And I think you would agree with me, those of you who are parents, those of you, you know, if you're just, you know, a person with feelings who understand that sometimes when one is put in a situation, he or she handles themselves how they feel for it. But again, I want to stress the bottom line is that the incident did not occur on school grounds, did not affect the education of the other students in any way, and for this to be considered to go on to the end of the year, again, to me, it's just wholly unjustified.
Okay, thank you for coming. Usually we don't talk about these issues in public. I would just direct you to speak to the superintendent after the meeting, if you'd like. Okay, thank you.
I appreciate that, and because of the situation and the length of time that I was considering to be given to the student as far as out of school for the remainder of the year, needless to say, we have to put the state education office, you know, on notice, because it just seems, because like I said, you know, I don't even think a punishment is needed, but just the fact of, you know, let's be wise about this.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Crystal Wilkie, 86 Indiana Avenue. I want to talk about the, sorry, this is my first time getting on this. I just want to talk about the classes that are going to be moving from Lido to West, the inclusion pre-K that's going to be going there for kindergarten now. My daughter is one of those kids that's in that class, and just dealing with other kids that I have two kids that have IEPs and special needs, so dealing with them in transitions, I don't know if they're necessarily be the best situation. They're comfortable in this place, they're safe in this place at Lido. The teachers there are amazing. You know, my daughter has two fantastic teachers. You know, she sees my son, her brother every day because they're in the same school. So by taking that away from just them, and that's, you know, me being selfish talking about my own kids, but there's the other kids that might have this issue with transitions, and to move them from school and dealing with one of my kids who has issues with transitions, I just think it would be detrimental to all the other students in there.
Thank you. And again, those issues, it would be good to, I don't know if you've had your annual review yet, but to raise them with the CFD.
What's that?
If you've had your, and when you have your annual review, to raise them with our special ed staff with CFD.
Yeah.
Because I think that's,
Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, Jocelyn Simon, 57 Dolphin Street. I just had a quick question regarding the 400,000 coming back from FEMA. Will that go to any specific buildings? Will it be allocated in any way, especially east, for any upkeep for the building itself? As we know, east needs, from what we're understanding, some upkeep. So will that money be put back into east?
So what happens in a situation like this, when the district receives revenue, it goes into our general revenue category. It's not where, it doesn't work that way where you get money that you can spend it, right? If we want to spend money in any area, we put it in the budget. And then when we get money such as a reimbursement from FEMA, which actually covered COVID-related cleaning costs for the most part, district-wide, it goes into our general revenue category. And as you see, it helps just improve the bottom line for the end of the year in terms of ending the year with an operating surplus, or at least a surplus in revenue. So it's not like, like in your personal, like home situation where, I'm getting money, now I can spend it this way. It just doesn't work.
I didn't know if it just stood in the district and then it was going to be allocated in a certain way.
Well, usually what happens is when the revenue comes in like that, it comes in because we're reimbursed for prior year's expenditures. And then we get the money in that particular year. It helps our revenue, bottom line revenue for that year. In terms of what we want to spend in future years, that's always a budget decision in terms of how we're going to spend it in future years. It's not connected. Yeah.
Chris Messiati, 65 Carrington Street. Just a question, and I'm glad this slide's up. The allocation is to keep these open through the end of June next year. Does that include enrollment outside of pre-K? Are there going to be children allowed to enroll in East School next year, the 24-25 school year? So with that being said, is there any, not commitment, but idea, thought of even extending that beyond the 2024-2025 school year?
yeah, so, as we mentioned in the last meeting at least, we're in the process of putting together an advisory committee that will look at the data we need to look at to make a decision. And we hope that we'll be able to make that decision one way or another, whether it's to reduce from 4 to 3 buildings or not, by the end of this school year. And then if the decision is to reduce, that committee would also help us in formulating some transition plans. But the decision hasn't been made yet. The board wanted to give some additional time to that decision. We're doing some things like getting an updated demographic study, looking at potential zoning and, if we were to do that, and looking at all of our properties, to be honest, and to see if there are other things that we haven't thought about, and make the decision in a more principled way. So the thought is that committee will meet in May and June. We'll make a decision one way or another. And if it really is one way or another, the decision is not made by June. And then if we need to move forward with a committee after that, we will.
And I've received a few text messages from people watching at home. They can't hear it.
Yeah, with the acoustics in here. We're trying to be as loud as we can.
We're trying to be as loud as we can.
Jillian Laporta, 611 Boulevard, and my bodyguard, Matthew. I just wanted to make a statement, if that's okay. The first 2 months that my daughter attended East, she walked to school sobbing. She was only 4, it was her first time away from home. My son started his education in a similar fashion with the added bonus of COVID, masks and crying, filled with anxiety. My children both took their first big steps in this building. Technically, they began to navigate their new lives outside our home. The transformation between the children who first entered this building to the little people who are today is tremendous. They're thriving, happy, and excelling in their academic endeavors. I want to thank the East staff, but especially Ms. Snow, Ms. Richards, and Mrs. Spinks, who always have my gratitude, for being my kids' first teachers, and for starting them off with positive association with education. For no other reason, that is why I'm here. To say I care, to say this impacts my family, and to say I'm one of the many who want the school to remain open. But I'm more than just a mother, I'm a homeowner. As a homeowner, I'm astounded by the lack of preparation, foresight, and transparency when it comes to school. How is it possible that in the last 12 years, since Long Beach received the funding from Sandy, that no plans were made to supplement that money when it ran out? Why was the trigger to losing state funding automatically to close East School? And why, after stating that we will most likely not lose foundation aid this year, may lose it at some undetermined date in the future if there's still no clear-cut alternative to shutting down East? The Long Beach Hospital down the block from my house, covered in moss and rotting from the inside out, reminds me of a dystopian novel. I have no desire as a homeowner for my property to be flanked by two lifeless buildings, stripped of its essence and purpose. My sociological brain can't help but think of the broken window theory that states that visible signs of disorder and misbehavior in an environment encourage further disorder and misbehavior. Last Friday, my kids and I went around the community distributing flyers to raise awareness. There were several houses where we couldn't find a mailbox. At one point, I put a flyer under a doormat and walked away as I realized there was a mailbox on the side of the property. My son Jack ran back, picked up the flyer, and put it in the mailbox. I told him he didn't need to do that. It was cold and we were in a hurry. He told me, if you're going to do something, do it right. That's what we were asking today. When the budget needs to be reallocated, don't be hasty. Have a contingency plan and be transparent with your intentions. If the only Hail Mary is to close the school, please do it. Lastly, when you're faced with these decisions, keep in mind the preschooler named Lorelei, who used to sob all the way to school. But now she laughs, she smiles, and she skips instead. Thank you for your time.
I don't know whether it's been said, but we don't encourage applause or booing. I'll say it in case nobody heard it. I know you're having trouble in the back hearing. And we do not. We have a protocol at these meetings that's been established for a number of years. We respect everybody's opinion. We hope you respect the protocol that we've established for the last 25 years. It doesn't do the issue any good to break protocol, to clap, to smile when you're clapping. It doesn't do the issue any good. It's a sensitive issue for everyone, whether you care to believe that or not. And I would ask you please to abide by the established procedures of Board of Education meetings. Thank you, ma'am.
Carmen Hendricks, 272 West Walnut Street. I just have a quick question of clarification. Is mindfulness funded in this budget? It is not. Thank you.
Caitlin Rubin,
Just speak into the microphone, please.
Caitlin Rubin, 72 Kirkwood. Going off what Mr. Wilkie said, us hearing about the ICT class, that's the pre-K class right now. We've heard rumor that it's going to be moved to the West School, and Dr. Gallagher, we mentioned about waiting for their CSE to happen. For my son, his is not until the end of May, so planning in what is appropriate for him doesn't really give a kid that doesn't deal well with transitions a lot of time. To explain to him his friends he's going to now have to leave and go to a new school again. When I thought for our special ed kids, we wanted to have a least restrictive environment. So instead, our children who struggle with transitions are now going to move again for another school year when that might not have been the attention to begin with. I'm just very confused at why we're not having ICT classes in every single school if a student is enrolled in that school to have that class, if that's on their IEP.
Yes, so what I'm saying to you is I can't answer that because that is based on your individual student. When we put all the pre-K special education students in Lido, we did so with the intention that probably there would be some movement for kindergarten. There are many kids in our ICT special ed at Lido, from my understanding, who are being declassified. So those kids might remain at Lido. I just don't know if your individual child, that would be something we have to talk to.
They would have to, if they stay on ICT, they have to move.
That's my understanding, right? As we have.
But the kids who struggle with transitions, possibly on their IEP, are the ones that are moving, and not the students who are declassified for general education. They are the ones who are. That is very confusing to me.
Again, I would really, really, really encourage you to talk to your special ed person, teacher, and director. That's not something that
But it's staffing, it is. It's to have that teacher in that class, that is staffing. That doesn't, my child special education teacher is not gonna put somebody in
We have never had ICT in all four buildings, never.
So every year, students move from building to building if they're in ICT? I'm very confused.
They usually start in kindergarten and stay in that building.
So
Because we did pre-K this year, and it was a new program, they concentrated all of the special education programs in pre-K. Made it easier in terms of related services, and in pre-K, there's a lot of movement. So there may be a lot of movement in general in kindergarten. There may be other parents who move to different buildings. We typically have about 40 students who didn't attend pre-K here who joined the district. So again, and for some people, my understanding was people who knew this. If you didn't from the.
No, I don't know who would
That's
have
a
that.
problem. Well, at the CSE meeting, that should have.
That's happening May 27th.
No, there's one last year.
The one last year, they told me that he's gonna be in Lido and how perfect it is because he'll be right next to the middle school for when he transitions to there in 7 years, not 1 year later. That's crazy to me.
Let me speak to my team about that, but they're really the ones that we should call like tomorrow. Thank you.
Sir?
I'm Jared Rubin, 72 Kerwood Street, former Long Beach alumni, current educator, pretty upset husband right now. My child is the one that is in pre-K and is now going to be switching if he's still recommended for ICT for next year. We originally didn't want Lido, I'm going to be totally honest with you, we wanted another school, which I don't need to talk about, but we were convinced to have him put in the best placement and the least amount of transition. So for a youngster that struggles with transition, to now ask him to move from the school that he's gotten used to, the amazing teachers that he has, the amazing Lido staff that he has, and keep in mind, I did not want this school originally. Now you're asking him to move. That's absurd to me. That is not best educational practice. It's not. Directly from the New York State Education Department, under federal law, the presumption is that students with disabilities will attend the same school they would have attended if they did not have disabilities. And that removal of or restriction from the regular schools and classrooms can only occur for reasons related to the student's disability. Least restrictive environment means that placement of students with disabilities in special classes, separate schools, or other removal from regular education environment occurs only when the nature or severity of the disability is such that even with the use of supplementary aids and services, education cannot be satisfactorily achieved. I'll just hit the really important ones. And now this is from the New York State Bar. A procedural violation will only be found to constitute the denial of free access to public education if it significantly impeded the parent's right to participation in the decision-making process regarding the provision of the free access to public education, or if it results where he's made friends, where he has family, where he's created a new Lido family. New York State. To the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educating with children who are not disabled, and that special class separate schooling or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular educational environment occurs only when the nature of or the severity of the disability is such that education in regular classes and the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. That's because we are making this decision to switch. And to me, it sounds like we're making this decision to switch this class because it's the best interest of the adults, not what's the best interest of the students. Think about that. Students with disabilities cannot be removed from age-appropriate regular classrooms solely because of needed modifications in the general education curriculum. A school district is responsible for securing appropriate placement and may not delegate this responsibility to the parents or BOCES. The parent has the right, prior to the placement, to see the actual class, if one is in existence, and the right to question concrete elements of the placement, such as class size, location, qualification of teachers, teachers' aides, and many other factors that relate to the program.
Sure, you have 3 minutes, Rob.
Well, this won't be the last you're hearing of me, and I can promise you that, because this is ridiculous that these types of decisions are being made with our dollars.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Please.
Street. I'm not going to harp on it because you just heard a lot, but I'm in the same situation. Maybe slightly different because I did have my CPSE to CSE meeting on Monday. It didn't make a difference. We kept those 4 educators 45 minutes past and got the same answers. We also didn't know ahead of time. In fact, we only heard about the West during a CPSE to CSE introductory transition meeting, at which point we immediately emailed asking for an earlier CSE meeting, and we were denied. So at least from an information standpoint, this is a problem. Another problem that we just learned about for the first time was a change from having, in my son's ICT class, having a special ed teacher there all the time, having a special ed teacher there 4 nights of the time. I understand that an ICT class is not necessarily guaranteed under law, and we are looking for the least restrictive means. I guess my broad question would be, has the district done any sort of survey or examination of other ratios that are not 12-1-1, but perhaps are a little bit more accommodating than a 4 nights at a time? And if so, is that something we can explore, especially in terms of budget? It seems very problematic to have children go, putting aside the transition from one school to another, to then go from a full day to a half day.
Thank you.
Dr. Gallagher, would there be a way that we could explain to everybody about the ICT classes and what exactly they do and how they're set up?
So the ICT classes, just to clarify, and correct me if I'm wrong, are going from 5 periods to 4. Correct. There were never 9 periods. And that was really not, it had nothing to do with budget. It was about looking at our structures that are used in other districts and providing the right amount of support. In some cases, our ICT students were getting more support than our special class students, just because of scheduling issues and how that all kind of played out. We were looking at just reducing by 1 period the amount of support so that students have the opportunity to participate in some other things as well. That means there's 2 teachers in that room for 4 periods out of the day. And on the student's IEP, it should say which 4 periods they would be in those ICT classrooms for. Did I miss anything?
The ICT model is written as minutes on the IEP. We switched it. It's 4, in essence, it's 4 periods. The additional support to students for pre-teaching and reteaching has been the shift because of the general education structure. So that's the only change as we move forward.
Hi, Christine Berg, 710 West Olive. I'm here for the same reason. Our main concern as parents of ICT 4-year-olds is also the switch. It was just not communicated to us when we first signed up for Lido. We're very happy at Lido. We're excited. but it was just not communicated that after 1 year, he was gonna make a switch. So that's very concerning. And then, of course, also the change from, we have a very good ratio of almost like 4 adults to 1 kid. Now it's gonna be pretty much 1 adult for half the day. And I know the periods are like a little confusing there, but it's gonna be a big change for our little guy between changing class, changing school, a lot of changes, less adults. There's a lot going on. So I think from the special ed parent standpoint, just communication of specifically the transition for these little guys who have trouble with transition would be helpful. Thank you.
Amala Red, 545 East Park Avenue. I want to inject a thought followed by a question. I'm new to this community, having purchased and renovated a house in the last 15 months. My family's lived here 30 years, and my little cousin Chaz is a student here when his family faced the threat of being displaced 10 or so years ago. I want to inject that reprimanding an audience, simply showing support for a crying mother, doesn't encourage the type of empathy I think we've all come to know in this community. Even if that type of response is not in line with protocol, let's just be kind to each other. On to my question, having worked in real estate development for 20 years, I frankly find it suspect that the school is void of future plans for what I think we can all consider a prime piece of real estate in this town. Like many, I'm deeply concerned about the future plans for this site, and just as my cousin Chad's mother Renee and others fought against the transition, I think the board should be prepared for this community to knock back down. I think I speak for all of us when I say that we want this school to stay, and it should.
Stacy Russo, 561 East Olive Street. I am a former school teacher whose last school, and excelling one at that, closed due to state budget cuts, and our building being the oldest in the district needing the most repairs. Sounds familiar. It's the biggest reason I'm no longer in the classroom, though I still work in the education sector. I'm also a former East School alum, I won't say which year, with the fondest memories of this school, and who moved back to Long Beach after 16 years away so that my daughter could have the same experiences I had. I'm experiencing this potential closure from all angles, and I implore you to reconsider closing these. I understand that there have been limited studies on the impacts of school closure on a community or on student achievement. What studies have shown is that closings have disparate impacts on low-income students, students with disabilities, and minority students. Even though academic performance and space utilization may seem somewhat unconnected, both of these bases consistently result in closing schools that serve the district's most vulnerable student populations. Speaking of these students, according to 2022-23 data on the NYSED website, East School by far has the largest diversity of the 4 elementary schools, with 48% minority students, including my multiracial child. 33% of those are Hispanic. The other district schools are all in the 30% range in total for minority students, with 20% students being Hispanic. East also has the highest percent of homeless students at 3%. Only West has any reported numbers. And the highest percent by far of economically disadvantaged students at 42%. The other districts all hover in the 20% range. These students stand to lose more than anyone, and we don't want to keep hearing that students are resilient and it's just the building, when research with these populations shows otherwise. I would like to know, and I have other questions as well, what the Board of Ed is doing to address these concerns and protect our most vulnerable population of students. I also want to bring to attention that these meetings have limited attendance, and there should be something done to be more inclusive. I have yet to see an offering for an interpreter, closed captioning, or subtitles for previously recorded meetings, childcare services, etc. All of these can greatly restrict Spanish-speaking, single-parent families, and others from attending. Has the board considered this as well, and what can be done to be better? Apart from the questions I have previously asked, I want to know what research are you using to guide your decision and believe that these children will be fine? And what efforts have been proactively made to speak to this population that research says will be adversely affected? I just want to close by stating a school is not just a building, just as a student is not just a number. And we talk about being responsible, our greatest responsibility is to our students. Please help us by continuing to advocate for our children, including
these underserved populations and we can serve those needs. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
I would love answers to your questions. Do you need me to repeat any of them? Yes? Okay. First one was, what is the Board of Ed doing to address the concerns and these concerns and protect our most vulnerable population of students?
Dr. Gallagher, didn't we say earlier that we were, I'm sorry, but we said earlier we were going to form an advisory committee, made community members, PTA members, Board of Education, just so everybody would have a word in what would happen to our schools, for all 4 of our elementary schools. So it's not like we're focusing just on East, we're talking about the general welfare for all of our buildings, for all of our students. And Dr. Gallagher mentioned that those meetings would begin in May. So there will be flyers sent out and information sent out to our community, who will be able to come onto the committee, who wants to be on this committee and such.
I understand, but my question was specifically, what is the Board of Ed doing? It's great, I've been talking actually back and forth with Dr. Gallagher, and we'd agree that an advisory committee is great. Although I would also argue to, as New York State has made suggestions about who should be serving on that, it should also include local businesses, staff of schools, et cetera. But I really just want to know, has this something that the Board of Ed has considered, and what is the Board of Ed doing to address these vulnerable populations?
Besides helping to maintain our programs and looking carefully at our budget to make sure that all of our students' needs are being met, I mean, that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. Between the 5 of us, we go and we visit all of our schools and we talk to our community members and we see what our students are doing and check on our staff. I think that we're always there and we're always asking questions, such as Dr. Ryan's earlier questions. What do you need? What do you need to make your programs better? It's an every single day job. So your question really is very vast because you're basically asking what a Board of Education trustee does. And we're out there, right? We're out there every single day.
Could I just jump into something? So, if I may, I don't know that your question is their responsibility, it's ours as district administrators. I think there are 2 discrete things that have happened here. The first is a decision has to be made. And so my team has been talking about all the things that you raised. And we do have ideas about how to support our most vulnerable students, how to do this in a way that minimizes the impact on students. But first we have to know if we're doing it. So, the first thing is to make a decision, and that is the Board of Education's job. The second part of it, and I emailed you a bunch of you, is yes, we are absolutely thinking about that and coming up with different ways that we can best support our kids.
Do we still believe, though, that closing the most diverse school out of the district is the best idea and would be in everyone's interest?
I think that decision has to be made.
I say yes. It hasn't changed my opinion at all. I think all the children will be very well served in the other elementary schools. I said that in the past, and I'll say it again. So as for me, I am very, very comfortable that all the kids would be very well served on any of the other elementary schools.
Even though research has said otherwise.
I'm just telling you, I'll give you my question.
No, I appreciate it. I'm just saying the research, and I'm happy to share this with the board if you would like.
I'm conversant with literature. Thank you.
Okay, and then I have other questions you still haven't answered.
If you leave them with the district clerk, we'll answer them. Okay, thank you. You can leave them up here, and we'll take them. Please.
Magnolia. Just jumping on with the ICT kindergarten. I had my meeting, and in the middle of my meeting, I find out that my kid has to go to a whole different school again, and we moved have a different plan too. And you're like, in your meeting, but
Can you just give us some time on that one? All of you raised that tonight.
okay, so we don't want to hear anything else. Because my other question about that is, I don't see any gen ed kids having to get up and being their parents being told, hey, in this random end of the school meeting, you gotta move your kid to the other side of town. The whole school lives. Yeah, well, no, we want to keep you guys open. We want to keep you guys open. No,
But it's also like, I don't hear like the Lido parents in the other pre-K classes being told, hey, you gotta go. On the 19th.
Just in fairness, part of the reason this happened, and I'm telling you, I hear you, and we're gonna see what we can do here, is that we used to do PK all at Lido, so everyone moved. And the decision to focus our special education classes at Lido this year was because they had the space and the facility to do all the related service providers in one place. If you know anything about center-based programs, any kind of, that's usually what happens. That's why they work so well. But clearly, this was not communicated to parents, and that's a problem.
I wasn't even included in my CPSE to CSE meeting. I got the phone call.
That's a problem, and I think with all good intentions, people thought it was, and it wasn't, and just let's give us a minute to see how we can fix it.
Hey. Sure. Hi, my name is Daniel Alisea. I live at 55 East Walnut. I'm a New York City special education teacher, teaching for the last 28 years. The other day, East parents had a meeting with Dr. Ryan, and there were some questions about the closing of East School. One of the things we did here related to ICT that Dr. Ryan told us is that ICT is too expensive. Especially if it was 19 students and you had 2 teachers in the same room for the full day. That's what we're dealing with here. If the priority is just merely frugality and not the individuals that are inside of our schools, our marginalized, our IEP students, all of our students, and all we're doing here is trying to save a few cents, what I'm hearing from the parents from Lido today is that their federal rights are being violated. Idea and least restrictive environment. And tell you what, as a special education teacher who does IEP cases, if an IEP teacher, the special ed teacher, a parent, and the general ed teacher decide that there's going to be 5 periods of ICT, it's going to happen. The district is going to pay for it. Those decisions are made inside of an IEP meeting. And what I'm hearing tonight from the superintendent falls under the category of predetermination. And so parents of Lido, I encourage you, take matters into your own hands. But we're seeing that type of mentality permeate when it comes also to the closing of East School, where $8 million for an HVAC system is just too expensive. No, we can't have clean filtered air or air conditioning. It's just too expensive because somehow East is a money pit. And so, rather than invest this in the same children that spoke to us before from the woodshop, there are valedictorians in this district that came from East. We are not talking about return on investment of widgets. We're talking about our school children, the children that we love. We were pitted against each other from the email from Dr. Gallagher. There was a zero-sum game. We've been into this Hunger Games mentality for the last few weeks, in which programs were pitted against the closing of this school district. And tonight we found out that now there is a surplus of $2 million. And what do I hear? Hey, what do you want? Hey, what do you want? Some type of Amazon wish list. We want the school to remain open. That's what we can do with that surplus. Keep this school open and make sure that you are servicing the most vulnerable among us. That you're servicing our IP students, and if that means they need an ICT class in East, in West, in Lido, in Lindell, then let's have it. We're going to fully fund our schools in this district because our kids matter. We can become a tourist town or we can become a family town. And this town is for families. So,
Your time is up, Mr. Alisea.
I'm encouraging everyone in this room, please contact the New York State Education Department, Carmen De La Rosa. Tell them what's going on as far as special education in this district. Please contact Thomas DiNapoli. We need an audit in this district.
just like we had a few years ago, because cash would not be,
Time is up, right, wait, time is up, I don't want to get.
let's take care of our children first.
Okay, I just want to remind you, please.
Can I just make a comment? So, I know that emotions in here are really hot. I think Dr. Ryan said it no less than 3 times, and many of you haven't come to a lot of board meetings, but it is protocol not to cheer and shout. It's just dragging everything out, it's loud, nobody can hear.
Just so
you know, I'm sorry, this is not appropriate, but I'm saying something. I come to every board of ed meeting, and I'm not saying, and I know who I'm talking to, because I don't know where the comment came from. Okay, great, speaking to you, okay? I do not want East School to close either. This is my elementary school, my kids went. But as much as we want to raise our children to be respectful people, let's give these people. I understand that we may not agree, or all agree with what's going on, but we raise our children to be respectful. As adults, we would expect the same thing.
Please, no applause, I just want to, are you finished?
No, I'm not.
Sorry.
The other thing I want to address is the conversation about Lido School and pre-K. What happens here, the process is we're listening. You guys are coming up to the microphone, you're sharing information with the Board of Education. We hear you. Dr. Gallagher already just said, we're going to work on this. There was a miscommunication. Whatever happened, happened. So we're asking you guys to just be respectful and hang tight. And please, I am a parent of a special needs child. I have a child that is now in high school that has gone through special education. I understand it's stressful. I understand there's miscommunications in meetings, but we are listening. There's no need to go and report and do all these things. We hear you. We just need a little time.
Okay, I just want to add here, there are 8 students sitting up here in the front row, who apparently are students from East School. I don't know what message we're giving them. Unless all the raucous behavior, I have very serious concerns about that. So I just caution all of us in terms of that. We're supposed to be role models and setting examples for children. I don't know whether we're doing a good enough job tonight. But I just wanted to also speak to Ms. Galicia's comment. We don't take comments from the floor. If you want to speak, please come up to the microphone. Sorry, sir. Sorry. I'm sorry. All right, please, it's inappropriate. I just also wanted to say in terms of this budget, that I'm delighted for the first time in 20 years, we're looking at everything. We've looked at everything in terms of what is the school board doing. In terms of, we've turned over every stone, every budget code in terms of that. Yes, including special ed. Yes, including costs of programs. Because as board members, we have a fiscal responsibility to do that. To the people in this room and to the people who aren't in this room. But I've been in this district for 46 years, and I don't know of another district that's provided for special ed students as this district has. I've been on the North Shore and I've been on the South Shore. And I'm proud to say I've been there 46 years, and I've worked. But I'm just going to caution us once again. You may not think the applause, you may not think the speaking out makes a difference, but it does. I personally find it very discouraging, and I think it sets a very poor example for this town, for which I expect a much higher standard. So, sir, I apologize for cutting into your time, please.
You don't have to apologize. I hear the frustrations of my fellow community members. My name is Harold Webb. I live at 24 California Street. I've been an educator for 23 years in so many different facets. I've been a teacher to now an administrator. I've been an adjunct professor in my time. I've been here for 15 years, and more years ago, swimming with the Pharaohs. This is my home. This is my community. My 4-year-old goes to Lindell. The one thing that really makes an impression on me, as Mr. DeVito had mentioned before, these enrichment programs. Where were they? You made a great comment, Dr. Ryan, about this. Trying to figure out a way to get them back in. Because it helps our young children. It helps those with their mental health. What does closing a school do? Right? It does the same thing. I implore all of us here, to think differently in the future. We have a very evolving society. We need to make sure that we are ahead of the curve. Thinking archaically, like closing schools, not funding enrichment programs. I can only think of my daughter Jackie in a couple of years from now without these programs, and what many of us will have to do. We cannot think in the past. We must think a little bit more in the future. Somebody said this earlier, and I hear the frustration. You would have 2 buildings that were pillars in this community gone. All of our tax dollars would suffer. Our real estate prices will suffer. It's more than just a school, somebody said. School's part of the community, and you have to fight for it. So I understand this, being in a district that has dealt with a lot of what we're dealing with. I understand what we need to do for the future, and I really hope you hear everybody, because you will hear me again. This is my first time here, and I will make sure that I'm coming more and more.
Thank you.
Hi, Amy Brimson, 145 Belmont Avenue. So I'm hearing that you're adding on another social worker, is that correct? No.
It's been recommended. I'm just going to make a comment, I think somebody else made it. Just because it's been presented, the final budget will be voted on at the next board meeting.
But you're
In
saying
April.
that there's a
As
need.
of now, there is.
Is that correct? You're saying that there's a need for it?
I'm not saying the other 4 board members and the superintendent are, yes.
Okay. So if there's a need for a social worker because you're recognizing that mental health and well-being is so important, but I'm hearing tonight for the first time that mindfulness is being taken off the plate. And I'm really stunned by it, but not so much because it felt like the district really wasn't invested in mindfulness. And I'm really upset because the kids that aren't able to get to social workers or school psychologists, this is their only outlet. With schools closing, with the school possibly closing, and ICT moving, this is important. Mindfulness is very important. I know I have 3 children in this district, 3 very different kids, right? Special needs, 504, pretty, talented in other ways. But they all take from mindfulness. I can tell you wholeheartedly that they use it all the time. This is an important program that cannot be put aside. You cannot take this off the plate. This is what kids need. They need to know how to deal with all these different things that are going on within their community. It's at home. They need to have some sort of way to deal with what they're seeing. This is important, and I want this to stay on. And I don't know how other people feel, but this is an important thing.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Karen Atkinson. I'm at 668 Lincoln. I am a graduate of West Elementary, Long Beach Middle School, and Long Beach High School. I wrote down a few questions so I didn't forget them. So I'm wondering how the board can, or the district can determine how many kindergarten ICT classrooms there will be next year if all of the CSE meetings have not yet been held. And I heard you talk about how children grow, and we've heard parents share about the need to always place children in the least restrictive environment. Based on my child's needs, he was sent to an out-of-district school by Long Beach for pre-K. And I have a concern that if he requires a 1212 this coming year, he'll need to be in Lindell, and I won't have a choice of the school. And then as he grows, if he's more appropriate for an ICT the following year, that would mean a transfer to West. That would mean that my child would have 3 schools in 3 years. This is not a fault of the CSE committee. This is a limitation in where these classes are held. I assume that the ICT classes both are in West, so the special ed teacher can be split across both rooms, as we already discussed the periods will be 4 out of 9. Is there a consideration to have this model at more than one school? Do you have data on the percentage of Long Beach students who require a special classroom compared to other districts? Because I think it would be comparable. Our students are probably mostly the same type of learners. And I believe we have fewer ICT kindergarten classes than nearby districts. I also want to know if you've considered another or hybrid type of model somewhere in between ICT and a 1212, being that the ICT will have 1 teacher in the room at times, and the 1212 has 3 adults. The CSE team is working to make the best recommendation they can, and I'm locked into a school of possible transfers because of the limit in locations where these classes are offered. My last question, I see in the budget presentation everything that was included. Where can we find a list of what has been removed?
I think, Mr. DeVito, is it clear in his presentation that mindfulness was removed? I think that's the only thing that's not clear in this. We'll post on it.
So, just to answer that question, it's a little bit difficult to have a list because we have, a 35-page document if you print it out at the line by line. So we go through every code and try to review it, talk to the administrators, talk to the principals, and see how can we best serve the needs of the students. Where do we have increase or decrease? The slide up here is just the highlights of what's in the budget. There are other things as well. So I'm not quite sure if you're asking for some of the big reductions. Like, for example, we talked about the fact that.
I'm curious if the district makes public an itemized list of what is, like a spreadsheet. Here's what we're keeping, here's what we're
No,
taking
because
out.
again, it wouldn't be exhaustive, like the line by line, right? So if you take a look at current budget, right, and then you look at proposed budget, you'll see increases and decreases in funding. Now, if you have a certain question, I can certainly answer it, but in terms of like the programs, like, we're really not reducing any programs at this point that, like in terms of a highlight, except for the mindfulness program,
I'd interrupt you too, and I think it should be doing that in the whole area of enrichment. We came in tonight with the understanding that enrichment was going to be cut.
Well, what was actually never in the budget because it was grant funded.
Right.
And we had said that
It
we
wasn't
are.
going to be funded. It's more probably what I'm with. A couple of board members are saying, gee, maybe we should have it. Maybe we should find the money for that. So in terms of a list, it would not be a reliable list until the April 16th meeting when we vote on the budget, because that's when it becomes final. Because between now and then, social worker, enrichment.
I guess I was hoping to learn about it before it was final.
Right, well, certainly we could put together something similar, but it just wouldn't be comprehensive, right? Because, for example, there was some slight reductions in some of the FTEs. We talked about that in prior presentations. We talked about the reduction in some of the sections at West and at East and at, the high school, things of that in terms of enrollment or in terms of course schedule. So you'll see some reduction. So you can say, well, it didn't affect the program, right? Because we're still serving students, but there was a cost savings. So if you're looking for what's not in the budget, it would be if it's like the mindfulness service that was delivered by that particular staff member, that service is no longer in the budget. Of course, the staff member is, but that service. So it's not that much, to be honest with you, in terms of the program. Yeah, it would be the mindfulness, and off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else that's not in the budget, that's currently in the budget, separate and apart from what was supported by the ARC grant, right?
Thank you. The other thing you could do is go back and look at the videos of some of the prior budget presentations. There were things that were proposed to be removed that at this point have been added back. So most of the proposals, and that's why that slide was up earlier, most of the things that were proposed at first to not be in the budget have basically all been added back, except for the one position for mindfulness. But I just want to also make clear, just because the position has been eliminated, it does not mean that the district is moving away from supporting the idea of mindfulness and for teachers. The real, and Dr. Gallagher, you can really do this better than I can, but the real plan was for that teacher who was teaching mindfulness to the classes to also teach it to the teachers, so that they would learn how to then continue the mindfulness program when she's not there. So it's not that the district does not support it or that board members don't believe that mindfulness is important, because it certainly is. It's just that that one teaching position is, or that position, I should say, the mindfulness position is being eliminated. That's right.
So I have 3 kids in the elementary level, and mindfulness has always been very important to me. The whole board too, but when we brought the mindfulness position, this special education teacher, We're supposed to integrate a holistic approach for mindfulness to be integrated into all the classrooms, so everyone has coping mechanisms. It wasn't designed for one person to come in and for a few minutes a day or a few minutes a week, go and see these students directly. Now, there's some benefits of having a person who's very good at it, focus on it, and do it all the time, but there's a greater benefit for everyone in the district to obtain this holistic approach and use this skill internally. So it's not supposed to be, hey, here's a trainer, you do this only when you're with the trainer. It's supposed to be, everyone's supposed to integrate it. So we're not getting rid of mindfulness. Mindfulness is important and it's staying, but they're shifting a special education teacher back into doing services for special education. And mindfulness is going to be brought back together through other means to the entire district and all the kids and all the staff. So that may have been a miscommunication, but we're not getting rid of mindfulness. We're just shifting a teacher from focusing on only mindfulness to provide special education.
Hey, we don't have any questions from the board. If you have something to say, please come to the microphone. Thank you, Beth.
So will you consider the hybrid or other type of classroom model?
Well, we'll consult with special ed. That's not in our bailiwick in terms of that one.
Thank you.
We have done it.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sarah Schubert. I live at 56 Reynolds Drive in Lido. Two questions. One might be a follow-up. The two high school special education teachers who are being kind of moved around. We have a lot of elementary parents here tonight. We've had a lot of conversation about elementary ICT on the secondary level. Can you guys speak to what that shift would look like in the ICT classroom for middle school and high school?
Do you have another question?
Oh, yeah. The other question is, I'm a parent of a little one, and our hope was to be an East family. And the question mark over the future of this building is a big deterrent in our plans for our daughter and our family. So, question, comments?
So I think the first one is really just a reduction in the need at the high school. It's not a cut or a shift in programming.
And so will the secondary schools have that similar shift of the time in the classroom with the special education teacher?
We have already started to do that. And again, I think what Dr. Brancaci said, it's really just looking at how the services are delivered. Some of it was just doing goal work, and sometimes that can be done in the context of the ICT classroom.
Absolutely.
But it's just look at, especially at the secondary level, we don't want to hamper them from taking electives or things that, if it's on their ICT that they need ICT for 9 periods, they can't take some things that don't have to be teachers.
I was just wondering if it was declassification, student choice and electives, or if it was a different shift.
Yeah, it's just
Okay.
shifted in enrollment.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Kathleen, I'm 518 East Park. I just wanted to reiterate the importance of enrichment and mindfulness. I think looking at the proposed budget, I think there should be on there as opposed to being Coleman. I mean, Coleman could be fundraising for it. I agree with the great community. Very extra money to pay for Coleman if you needed to. Whereas something that embodies the whole school, the enrichment program, mindfulness, it's a bigger area for children, for their mental health. I just think that should be looked at much more rather than a field trip. Personally. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen McKenzie, 61 Vision. Okay, so for the last couple of months, we've been talking about a budget gap of $3.8 million. 2 weeks ago, it was presented that the district realized we would be taking in approximately another $1 million in earned interest, and you've presented that again tonight, along with $1.8 million that we took in this year. Because of this and the additional full funding that we anticipated with state aid, it would seem like our budget can close that gap. I share this because I've also heard a lot from members of the front about how you want to think long-term, how you want to be fiscally responsible. So I started looking through what you posted with the line by line, and I made the assumption going into it that a rollover budget was this year's program at next year's rate. So it surprised me when I found multiple examples of cost increases, some well in excess of 30%. I found this peculiar given, again, the priorities that I feel like I've heard from members sitting up front. because we can't rely on the additional interest in future years. And so I guess I assumed that because we would have unstable funding in some sources that helped us close the budget gap, we would never dream of adding things when we didn't need to. And so, for example, I saw a 55% increase in the board budget. I saw a $99,000 increase in business administration salary, $80,000 in operational staff at Lido, $85,000 in operational repair and maintenance increase, $63,000 in supervision coded to Lido, $235,000 for K-3 teachers at West. I can go on, but most concerning to me, not because of the purpose, because I believe, like all of you kind of talked about this, every kid should get what they need, but because of a clear example of a lack of long-term thinking and poor consideration of consequences, the alternative school for an increase of $315,000. In 2020, a different board closed the Nike school. Because of COVID and lax regents rules, it made sense. Our graduation rates in our high school and the kids that could have been in that program are probably now struggling, and we want to bring it back. So here we are, 4 years later. We didn't think long-term then, and you aren't thinking long-term now when we think about the closure of East School. The lack of clarity on a long-term plan or potential impact should never result in action to close the school. Parents and the larger community must be informed about the long-term implications on their kids, on the building, in their community, on the costs associated before any resolution is passed on this issue, especially as we have the opportunity to produce a budget that doesn't increase costs year over year in areas where it didn't exist before. I'm happy to share the things I've highlighted so that you can give me more insight as to what these particular increases relate to. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, Amy McNichol from Bellevue. First of all, I just want to thank you all for listening, like looking at the budget. It shows like Adam and a lot of things that he put every time to listen to a lot of us and appreciate that. I love you, Mr. Vito, so thank you for all of that. But my concern is, I know I'm a frequent flyer up here, and I have a student with special needs who has severe anxiety, and I talked about how I attended the PTA conference recently, and that we were in our worst mental health crisis that they've seen in 9 years. And it's nice that we're adding back in that social worker, but we're talking about cutting the mindfulness position, and Dr. Gallagher, you yourself said that some of these teachers are not meant to teach mindfulness. They don't have the skills. As someone just mentioned in the back, like I just didn't educate myself. These teachers are having to do 75 different things in 1 hour, and now they're going to be added mindfulness into that as well. Like, where are they paying out into the time? I think there are other areas that we could look at cutting things, but mindfulness is not it. Like saying that we're doing away with mindfulness, that we're not doing away with it, but essentially you are. You are doing away with it. It's not going to be the same in every classroom. Not every teacher has the ability to establish mindfulness. They don't have it in their personality. I mean, I can do it. There's teachers who have numerous students with disabilities and things like that in their classroom, and now they have to find the time to establish mindfulness. I mean, like I said, you yourself said that not every adult has that capability. So then
I just want to be clear. I think all of our teachers are awesome.
Yeah.
I think what I said is that I see benefits personally in having an expert teach the children those skills on an ongoing basis. I think I've used the analogy that if you learn to cook for 20 minutes from Julia Childs, it would be better than 20 years from me, if you know my cooking skills. But again, these are choices that we have to make.
And tough choices. I just think, as you, Dr. Ryder mentioned, we're in a mental health crisis. Maybe this isn't the best choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi. Carissa Ferrara. I live at 136 Coolidge Avenue. Bless you, bless you.
And I have a few questions. So, what research are you using to guide your decision and believe that these children are going to be okay if the school closes?
Would you ask all your questions in one time? Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Would you ask all your questions, please?
Sure. And what efforts have you proactively made to speak on this population that's going to be affected?
That's all your questions?
That's my questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
To speak on the population of these?
The population of the entire Long Beach community that's going to be affected because it's going to be a spillover of other students.
So what I said before is I think if I send out the research that we're looking at, the plans that we have, I would, I think, rightly be accused of predetermining the decision. I think the first thing that has to happen is a decision. Then meet together and look at the research, the past practices, the supports that we have in place, the supports that we can put in place. But the first thing that has to happen is a decision. Otherwise, we're talking about things that are not going to happen.
Okay, and I understand that, and I know you made a comment about people bringing their kids. My kids aren't here, but I don't think we're setting a bad example having our kids here when we're teaching them that you have to get what you paid into. This would be like our government turning around and saying you don't get Social Security now because, sorry, it's dried up. It's not fair. I think you guys should reconsider. We love this school. East is the best. You heard it from Jill. Our kids tried going into pre-K. My kids run into Resi and Mrs. Snow's arms every morning, and Mrs. Watson greets them we can't give this up. This can't just be an empty building. I know we want to try harder to have it stay. So, can we please just finally form a committee? We've been talking about forming a committee since the first meeting. Can we just do it? Yeah, my number is 516-300-3119. I gave it this time in the last two meetings, give me a call. Let's do it tomorrow.
Well, we can't do it tomorrow. So that's why we said tonight we're going to do it in May. We have to get through this. We have the budget process. We're running a district for 37 people. I understand that you want it urgently. We do too, but it's better to do it when we have the time to do it. We put this decision on hold for a reason, to give us the time to do it. In May, we will put the committee together and we'll meet in May.
Thank you.
Hi, Frank St. Paul's, 523 Fulton Street. Just a question of the previous rules work for cleaning chemicals and janitorial supply companies, as well as currently a building supply company. And just wasn't sure if facilities bids that requisite facilities for each of the schools put together and move forth with throughout the school year, are those made public for the community to look at? Where are those being located?
Where the agendas.
So all of them are the agendas?
They're all published.
Okay. There's just in previous iterations of being here and doing work in the community, and there was some issues with West School when they redid the floors and the boys' bathroom. There was a Triver team that was put the boys' bathroom, and anyone that knows how floors work, that Triver team should be put where young boys are finding out how to go to the bathroom. The cost alone just to clean those facilities was immense. They had to purchase machines and cleaning chemicals that were very excessive. So it's good to hear that there are ways that we can see what the bids are doing. Not to give any oversight. It is not to give oversight, but not to look over any facilities that are shoulders. I did a skylight project for Lindell Elementary. They did a great job looking at different bids. Being a community member, we gave them a great price. They're very willing to do it there. I just feel that my role as a community member, however we're able to save the community money, however we're able to put our expertise to the community, to the Board of Education, and just giving insights and everything, putting all the bids together for building materials. I don't even care about selling you guys the material. I just want to make sure that we're doing it fairly. Everyone, you guys are getting a good price at the end of the day, we're all paying for it. It's good to hear that you need to.
Thank you very much, thank you.
Mayor Seifert, Chairman Drive of the Beach. I came to listen to the special ed budget meeting, which I didn't really hear. I heard 3 basic facts, most of which didn't even have to do with special education. On the front of this presentation, it says that there's $21 million, $856,202. Where is that money being allocated? It's definitely not to our students, and I've experienced it firsthand. Scary, this PPS department. You cannot request during a CSE meeting where your child is placed. So stating that to a family is complete nonsense, incorrect information. It is known you cannot request a placement of that during a CSE meeting. It's not what you said, that is what you said. You said you should talk about it at CSE, but talking about where your child is going to be.
I said you should talk to the people who make them.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep going, because I have 3 minutes, and there are questions about this that I have. It says there are 2 new ICT classes at West. Having, again, I don't see what that has to do with the budget, although I think it's 1, because there's already 1 at West. So the one that's going over to West is already in district at Lido. So budget-wise, I'm not really sure how that's affecting anything. And as far as the ARP grant, which ARP grant is that? Because there are 2 on the state website, and both of those are for special education. You are putting those for a social worker, which it seems like the Lindell social worker, because that's the only one that's not listed on the line-by-line social worker budget on the district website that you mentioned earlier. So I went and I looked. It has, so the Lindell social worker is being paid for by funds that are supposed to be allocated for the special ed children. The social worker deals with the entire district, the entire school, 1 full school. Gen Ed, ICT, actually, I don't think there are ICT classes at Lindell, but all children there, not just special ed. So you're allocating special ed funds for all children. Again, on top of the fact, I still don't understand how that could be allocated for a social, why are you shaking your head? What's not correct?
Not allocating the Lindell social worker to
Well, then why isn't that 1 position on your full budget, line by line? Why don't you go check your website?
I don't need to check my website, it's a secret. I don't understand what you're asking.
Really?
You're saying that.
I'm stating a fact. The fact is, the ARP grant, and there's 2 types, who wrote it? What was it supposed to be allocated for? Did you specifically write on that grant to New York State that it was going for that social worker's position? Did you state that it was going for 2 wings teachers? Because I would love to see a copy. Because the amount of times I've been told about policies that don't exist, is numerous. So, I'll keep going now. How many kids are we actually servicing in the special ed department? Because ICT in 1 building, that means there's about 8 or 9 kids receiving ICT per grade. How is that possible? Because the other half of the class is gen ed. So I'm a little confused about how it's possible in such a large district, 250, 300 kids per grade, 7 kids need some type of support, modification to their curriculum that they require ICT. 7, I teach in district 3-4 classes. Each grade has 1 ICT per 3 to 4 classes. You're saying 1 ICT per, 13, 14 classes? Something's not adding up. Somebody said, why aren't we creating a program? That would be ideal. Well, maybe if we weren't spending money on a social worker or wings teachers that are supposed to be money towards special education, maybe we could. Maybe we actually could be spending this money on our children and the programs they need.
Another comment. Mental health crisis. And so the special ed department is saying you need that one social worker for one school for a mental health crisis that affects everyone. Again, taking away from special education. That was just a twisted way of trying to squeeze it in a way that works for you guys, not our children though. On top of that, if I remember correctly, there were 2 out-of-district students approved to be in district this year. That's 70,000. So we're at almost 400,000 per year that could be allocated to our children, but it's going social worker, 2 wings teachers, and 2 children that don't live here because you wanted them here. Where's the $21,856 going?
Right here. I leave this with you. If you go through the line by line, you can see the expenditures by code that add up to 21 million. Thank you.
This
Your time is
does
up,
not
Mr.
actually,
If you look at you please add it up. I just did a rough eyeball. I got close to.
general ed skills training, what?
Look
You're
at
giving me
22
nonsense.
look at 2250 under special education, Mrs. Seibert, and add them up and tell me what you come up with. When you at another time, please. Your time is up. Your time is
Well,
up.
how am I supposed to look at this if you're not giving me the time?
Take it home.
And then what? And then all
And
these
then
other people have the
apologize.
same
And then
questions?
apologize in terms of what we're doing.
Apologize? Apologize to you?
No, in terms of your question about what are we
I
doing
would
with the
never
money.
apologize to any of you. Never. It would
Well,
never happen.
All right, I just want to make the point about.
We have to advocate for our kids because none of you will. None of
Your time is
you,
up.
including you.
time-
Shake your head at me.
Please, your time is
I'm
up.
so glad that your child
Your
is in
time
district.
is up, Mrs. Seibert. Thank you.
My time is up. Your time is up. You've been here too long.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the support.
445 East Elm Street. So, I actually wrote down what I was gonna say, because I always get myself in trouble when I come up here, but my phone died, so I tried to jot it down on my husband's really quick. So there is a lot to celebrate here, and I think that a lot of parents in this room should take a lot of credit for the foundation aid coming back, because we fought very, very, very hard. There was a lot of these parents that did it. And so these programs are coming back because of a lot of us in this room. So thank you to everyone. I also, it really kills me to see that June 2025 end date on there, because it shouldn't be there. We should, this is a pause, seems very unclear. And so this seems like an end date and a due date. We're already starting to transition. So besides the point, I want to talk about this building and the space. Sorry, and I wish I had it written down. I don't see how this space can be repurposed for the community benefit and generate a long-term savings unless you sell it for development. That means no park, no community space, because things like that don't generate a profit. No profit means no additional fiscal benefit to the taxpayer. In the last meeting, you shared it could be used to add new programs as one possibility. But wouldn't that just put us back to where we are now with additional programs and staff we can't afford once the profit runs out? On the other hand, if you sell it, how can you ensure that it won't be sold for a profit large enough to benefit the taxpayer? Is your intention to use this school closure to save the taxpayers money or to benefit the community? I'm just curious, because you obviously can't do both. I'm looking at everyone, I'm sorry, you're literally dead center. I don't know why.
That's where you usually find me.
I mean, I do usually with you.
Yes, all your questions at once.
So is your intention to use the school to save taxpayers money or to benefit the community? And why is June 2025 still up there if
the foundation monies back, if we're gonna reevaluate all the facilities in all the schools, why is there an end date up there for each school?
It was just signifying a one-year budget. It wasn't meant to be an end. I think I was really careful in saying, we have not made a decision, and a decision has to be made. It's just talking about the 24-25 school year. That's really all it is. Don't read any more.
I know, but it's really hard not to read into it when like the preschool applications say your school might be closing in June 2025.
We have to be honest with people. We can't hide that information. But that decision hasn't been made yet. Okay, I said that decision hasn't been made yet. We have to be honest with people. We can't hide that it's a consideration. But that is not signifying an end date.
Wait, but wasn't it a consideration only because of foundation aid?
Yes.
And then as we said at the last meeting, as those conversations continued, they morphed into a different conversation. The conversation being, do we need 4 elementary buildings? Regardless of whether the aid comes back. Now, I don't have an answer to that. And we want to hear input before we make that decision. But we owe it to the community at large to at least have that conversation.
I hear you. Okay. But then for the vacant building, it just, and that's part of my question that I don't know who to look at or ask, is that it kind of feels like it's putting the cart before the horse if you're closing a building but you don't know what it's going to be intended for. So, and what is what is the intention, right? You must have conversations about this. Is it to save the taxpayers' money? Because that is what we're hearing, that we need to close East to save the taxpayers' money. And that Mr. DeVito has said that is not really true, right? That it could potentially, that it's not East and no taxes, right? Like it's not save East or close East and our taxes will automatically like get lower and we won't have a levy. And I believe you said that. It's very hot up here.
No, it's a little more complicated than that. It depends. I mean, it depends on really what happens long term in foundation aid, right? So we don't know what's going to happen long term. The state, again, we don't know what's going to happen definitely next year, but all the signals seem to say foundation aid is going to remain at least level, maybe even a little bit more. But they've also said that they're going to dig deeper into this foundation aid formula and make some changes. And for us, for Long Beach, based on property wealth that we have and the number of students that we have, it just doesn't look good for us long term. Now, I can't say when that's going to be, right? But I know if they're going to go and redo a formula, and there are a lot of other districts that maybe don't have the same property wealth that we have and have a greater number of students, they're probably going to want to give them more than they're giving to us. That's just what I think is in the future. But I think for next year, we're okay. I don't know how many more years it's going to be, but I think for next year, we're going to be okay. And that's why you see the budget that we presented today. Now, if we don't lose foundation aid, right? And let's say there is a decision to go from 4 elementary schools to 3 elementary schools at some point in the future, there may be an opportunity to do other things, right, with the savings. Maybe bring in some new programming and reduce the tax levy. And again, that's a longer conversation with a lot of community input, that if the best decision that the board makes with the advice of this committee is that we reduce from 4 to 3, right? Then we yield the savings. Forget about the salary part just for a minute. We yield an annual operating savings of about $4 million. So 20 years, that's $80 million, right? What does the board want to do with that type of savings, right? That's a decision I know is going to be part of the conversation over the next several months, is what do we want to do long term, right? So that answers that question. So it's not necessarily one or the other. It may be a few different things. Does that help clarify it a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
all right.
I think the last one is maybe for you, Dr. Ryan, because I'm staring at you, is that, you know, don't need 4 elementary schools, you keep saying that. But what will happen with this school, and will it for sure not cost the taxpayers more money, whether it be a charter school, a private school,
what is the plan?
Hey, that's part of the committee that's going to start today, that's going to be part of their charge in terms of that. And as far as, you know, so that's part of the charge of the committee in terms of that advisory committee that's going to be established in May. And the other part, in terms of you asked me, in terms of community or taxes, to me, they're the same issue. In terms of that, I think long-term it would represent the savings of the whole community in terms of taxes and in terms of the tax rate. So that's my part of my consideration for why I'm taking such a strong stand and minority stand on this issue.
Okay, I'm just gonna leave it off with my wish list is to keep you so.
All right, you're entitled. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Adam Cap, also 445 East Olive. The first bullet says East Elementary. If you're gonna close a school, any schools, you don't have to say East Elementary. You could just as easily say West or Lindell. It'd be just as grotesque to have that on. Every year is a new year to reevaluate. So once again, you are purposely putting the community against each other. This is on purpose. The proposed closure, as you equivocate repurposing of East School, you propose to keep East open for 1 year and in a few months, revisit. The intention is clear. You seek a closure. You've made that very clear. Let's address enrollment rates. Also wish DeVito was here, but the district has dropped since 30 years ago. Actually, it's remained pretty steady over that period. You take the graph that Mr. DeVito has, move it just a little bit, it looks consistent. Continuity in education across the district. Now, I don't work in the public sector, but I also work in budgets for about a similar amount, and I know how stats can be twisted to present a specific point of view. The stats that keep being presented to us represent a very specific outcome. Agreement to close. Something you want. We disagree. $9 million, roughly, over the last decade spent at East, presented as a negative. I view it as positive. We're investing, and now we want to throw it away. Not once did we see any other figures of the other schools in the amount invested there, just East. This was on purpose. You want agreement, we disagree. For the last 2 months, I've heard here, children are resilient. They'll move on, they'll carry on, they'll be fine. They have no choice but to carry on. They're not here. We are, you are. Who is responsible for the children? Doesn't sound like you, because you are specifically interested in saving money. That's it. If you close the school, property values go down, revenues will go down. There's no doubt about it. But yet, we continue to present, and use children as props here or here, so you can get a very specific outcome. Agreement, we disagree. We hear that there's a financial constraint, that the issue is money. Yet we're ready to buy new turf, get acoustic tiles for an auditorium. That doesn't seem like a priority. Instead, focus on the voiceless. The ones who are up here, but are used there, and used here as props for you to get your specific outcome.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to address a couple of your questions, if I might. I didn't know whether I understood it correctly. Did you talk about student enrollment over the past 30 years?
Yes, the graph Mr. DeVito showed, I think, 2 meetings ago, where it starts here, and then basically is consistent.
Right. But it has been a significant decline since then.
From 1 point. You can use that, you move a little bit to the right, it's consistent. You're just choosing a high point to start off with, and where we are now, over 30 years.
Sir, I'm just responding to your questions. You had 3 minutes.
No, but you're being disingenuous.
I'm not being disingenuous. I was here 30 years ago. I know what the enrollment
We're
was.
painfully aware that how long you've
Okay.
been here.
Right, I know what the enrollment was then, in terms of that. So, we'll leave it at that. Okay, I'm not so sure you were accurate in terms of that.
No, I understand the graph starts off at a certain point, high and ends low. I agree with you. You move forward 2 years, it's consistent across a majority of that time period. You're just choosing a point at which it was higher.
Okay, that's your interpretation of the
Like I
data.
said, there's 2 ways we present stats.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Can I just say, I just want to say one thing. We decided to do an advisory committee because we want to hear from everybody. And I understand your emotion clearly, I really do. But we are here to work together with you. We're not, and listen, we are. And I understand you, we understand and respect your viewpoints. And that's why we take the time to listen and we go to the schools and we ask people and we talk to our parents. Please remember that we are here to work with you. This is a partnership. That is why we decided to do the advisory committee. Doc is one person on the board. And yes, he is the president, and yes, he has taken a lot of heat tonight. And I really admire him for it. And I admire you also for coming up to speak the truth, your truth of things. I know how difficult it is. But please remember, at the end of the night, we're all Long Beach. We are all partners in this. And even if we disagree with each other, we need to do it amicably so we can move forward in a positive means, just like you said, for the future of our community, our children. Thank you.
We'll vote.
Thank you. You need Mr. DeVito?
Yeah. Yana Lipinski, 311 East Pine. Mr. DeVito, I really love talking about interest rates, and I missed the portion about the 5% interest income. Are we getting interest on our operating account? And how does that offset our rates and overall volume of outstanding debt? We've only really ever talked about one bond, but are there multiple maturities and other bonds that will come to maturity soon? We've spoken previously about postponing our stereo bond because of current optics of it in the time of budget cuts. What portion of postponing the bond for capital improvement is related to high interest rates and the overall current high cost of debt? We expect it to be back on the table next year when your advisors anticipate rates dropping, especially now that we don't anticipate losing funding. And when can we find out what the intention of that bond and future bonds will be? As last year, a portion of it was earmarked for capital improvements to the east without any anticipated net new tax.
There were a lot of questions.
I know.
So let's first start with one that I remember in terms of, I hope that next year that the board considers discussing a future bond issue again. I can't promise that the timing will be right, but we will certainly raise it again for the board's consideration, and we'll see. Okay, so that's just in terms of, will we talk about going forward with the future bond issue? So the bond, so there was one bond that the district, I guess, voted on in May of 2009, and that was a 92.9, or maybe 92.7 actually, $92.7 million bond. They borrowed in 2 separate times because you don't need the cash right away. So you time when you're going to borrow the money with when you need to pay the bills for construction. So that's why we borrowed some money, and 2 years later, suppose we borrow some more money, and that's how it's timed with cash flow. Those serial bonds, so those 2 different issuings, are coming up in terms of they're dropping off. They're going to be fully paid soon. So I think the first set, about 60 million, drops off in a couple of years. And 2 years later, the other 32 million drops off. That has just the way serial bonds work. In terms of the interest rate, right? So what is earning interest? So we have money in our bank accounts. The largest portion of it that continues on a month-to-month is the money that's in our different reserve funds. So they're broken out for specific purposes, but they're all earning earning interest at, right now, is a little bit above 5%, which is great for the district because we're benefiting from that interest income. When we spoke with our bankers about what it looks like for next year, they said it's likely going to come down, and it's going to come down to probably around 4% over the course of the year. So that's how we came up with the projection that's embedded in that other revenue category. Sorry, I don't remember some of the other questions.
How do the bonds that we have out there, how do those interest rates, or what is our cost of debt, how does that offset?
Yeah. Oh, it's much lower, yeah. So we actually refinanced it a couple of times and took advantage of low interest rates, and we're much better off than if we were to borrow now at a 5% or more interest rate. So, we were great and we got in low, and then when interest rates went even lower, we refinanced. And if you had attended some board meetings several years ago, you would have heard the discussion about some savings that we achieved and cost reduction in our debt service line because we reduced our borrowing costs by refinancing those bonds.
So ultimately, we're still gonna end up rolling them over.
No, we're not. No, that's
So
part of, I really understand it. I'm sorry, but it falls off. We're not rolling it over. We only roll it over, right, if the board decides to enter into new debt. And it's not even rolling over the old bonds, it's new bonds. So it's 15-year maturity. They're just about paid up, right? So in a couple of years, that big chunk that used to be $60 million, a lot of it's been paid off already over the past 13 years, will be fully paid off. It's not rolled over, it drops off. It then allows for an opening for new borrowing, and that's where that other school preservation plan, other capital plan that we had talked about earlier in the year was designed to say, as the old debt, or current debt rather, drops off, we can have new debt come in, and this way it keeps that line level. We've got more, if the board chooses, it could be a little bit less, but we never said it was going to be any more, no tax impact. Because as the current debt rolls off, we can substitute it with new debt based on the capital plan that we presented. So it's not rolling over bonds at all.
But if you're still substituting it with similar, granted, interest rates are gonna be
Right,
higher,
right.
fees, whatever.
Yeah.
But net new to the taxpayer, it presumably negligible impact, right?
Well, we're going to design it, and that was the whole idea, so it's a zero impact. So we take a look at what the interest rates are likely going to be, and then the borrowing amount would be designed so that borrowing amount, 15-year payment, interest rate, debt service would keep it tax neutral. And that's part of the discussion of the past couple of years is how large of a borrowing would it be, how large of a scope of work.
I think that's my biggest question, because we keep presenting East as being such a liability for the cost required to maintain this building, and that it's gonna end up being a cost to taxpayers. When previously, when we talked about it, a portion of that debt issuance was specifically earmarked
Oh, yeah,
to fix the
absolutely.
piece.
Absolutely,
Right, so
yes.
technically, the plan that we had wouldn't that new cost taxpayers anything.
No, it doesn't take off. It's not all the costs. No, what was in the scope for that $85 million project was about $6.7 million for East. The biggest chunk, $6 million, being to put in mechanical ventilation and air conditioning in the building. And then about, $700,000 of other repairs. That was the part of the scope of work that said we would assign for East. Every building had a different amount, and most of it was actually at the high school, right? Doing new work at the high school for new programs at the high school, new facilities at the high school, for a lot for the CTE stuff that we heard about with the carpentry program. So there was a scope of work at the East School. What we talked about in terms of why is East even a consideration as a building to be closed? Now we're talking about 4 to 3, but why was even East out there? Because as an old building, that 6.7 that we may expand as part of this new capital plan addresses certain issues, but with an old building, there are things that happen, right? Like if you have an old house, it may be great, you buy an old house and all of a sudden 2 years later, something else fails and something else fails and there's a leak you never knew about. It's just the nature of old buildings, old construction versus new. And that was really the only point there. It's not really making any type of value judgment about, how great a building it is in terms of, the staff and the programs. It was just the simple fact about an old building, similar to an old house. And that was the only point there. Thank you.
Hi, Danielle Ferraro, 460 East Hudson Street. Most of my concerns are just about the advisory committee, and I think I understood that the advisory committee was going to be created in May, and then, you would have a decision in June, and that seems short-sighted. It seems like there's certainly not enough time to get all the information that would need to go into that choice in that amount of time. I know New York State has guidelines for creating these committees, and they put them together, and there's a 6-month span where they're, whether it's, I don't know, if they're getting their research in that time and then being able to evaluate it, or they already have it within that time. And I know that Long Beach doesn't fall under the constraints of having to meet those recommendations, but I don't see how that wouldn't be a good idea. And I just, when are we going to get this ball rolling? I mean, if we're still assessing if this is going to be closing and we're looking to make the decision this year, when are we getting people? I mean, I think we have a lot of people here that have a lot to offer, and their time is here, and I just, it seems like we're not getting our resources together in a productive way quick enough. All of it. It's not just closing the school. I live around the corner and have lived around the corner since Long Beach Hospital was open, and that sat empty forever. And then we have the school on the boardwalk that's been sitting empty for so long, and the super block empty for so long. Like, what is it going to do? And then again, I know you keep saying that the classroom sizes are not going to increase, but what does that do with changing the flow and how many kids are in the hallways and all these? It's challenging to drop my kids off at sports at Lido at night when it's just a few sports. I mean, gosh, Lido on Thursdays now with a bunch of sports is crazy. What is that going to look like in the mornings? What does that look like for the community members that live in those areas in the mornings? Like, I think there's so much to look into when you're talking about not just closing a school, what's going to happen to the building. And I think we have so many people that care for so many different ways that can really be beneficial in helping with those decisions.
Thank you.
So when are we going to get that committee going?
Next. But the decision, in terms of when the decision is made, that doesn't have to set, will take as long as it takes.
Okay.
Just so that you're clear too, it's a district-wide committee, because it is a district-wide.
No, I absolutely, I think it's a community-wide committee, that's what I'm saying. I think we should get all the people on it and hear from as many people as possible. Because I do understand that these meetings are task-specific, and I know we've been making them very don't close these schools specific for all this time.
Perfectly understandable.
So if we can maybe do some of these specifically for these issues as a community, that would be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew Rossi, 658 Exton Boulevard. I'll be brief. I'm just here to thank Mr. DeVito, who was able to convert a bond a few years ago. COVID got in the way. And as a result, he was able to find money to upgrade the sound and lighting systems for the high school and middle school. Oh, do that, yeah. As a result, our musicals were fantastic. We got to showcase the great talent of our school and our seniors and juniors before they leave. You stuck with it. We came to you and we asked, say, there's a need, can you listen to us? And you did. So thank you. And I'd also like to thank Ms. Conley for reminding us that we're Long Beach. Thank you.
Mr. Rossi, thank you for sticking with it, because I know you wanted this for a very long time. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steffi, 125 National Boulevard. I have 2 questions. I'll be quick. I know it's getting late. My first question, I guess it's not really a question, but sort of. I wanted to say I'm confused because I know that Dr. Gallagher, you keep saying that there hasn't been a decision in the East, but Dr. Ryan, who is the president and I guess the leader, right? few weeks now. What does the president, like the title of the president, what does that entail? That's not my question.
Well, I'll just interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's basically to take the abuse of people that don't quite agree with you. But that's primarily it. We're 5 equal votes here.
Okay.
We just happen to differ on this issue in terms of that, in terms of that. So I'm fully co-equal with each of the 5 other trustees up here in terms of that. But my vote is, as it's been stated many times. So I don't have any more authority than any of them, and I gladly give up this chair to any of them if they were stupid enough to take it.
The main role of the president is to lead the meeting, and also to respond to, communicate on behalf of the board, communication, that's it.
Okay.
Otherwise, he's really just a mouthpiece and the punching bag.
Okay, I mean, I just think in a way it sets the tone when you sit up here every meeting and you hear us, we're all passionate, some of us angrier than others, and you constantly say every meeting, your mind is made up. You want to close these schools. And I just want to ask, is there anything that anyone can say or do that would make you change your mind? Or are you, till the day of the vote, going to sit up there and say you've listened to everything and your mind is made up?
Just to answer your question, I made this comment sometime in January. I represent not just the people in this room, and I guess I don't represent many of you, but I do represent a lot of people in the community who see fit to elect me and re-elect me over time. So I owe those constituents, whether they're senior citizens or whether they're young people that can't afford to own a house here, whether they're people that just can't afford to pay the taxes, people I speak to, people that speak to me. That's where I'm coming from in terms of that. And I just feel as though those people aren't represented here tonight. And I owe them some representation because I believe as I do. So
I understand.
Let me just let you finish your questions.
Yeah, so I have one more question, but I just want to respond to what you just responded to me. And it feels like you're speaking to voters. And you're sitting on a board of education, and your job should be, as not the leader, the president, but not leader, to take care of our children. And it feels like every time you're speaking to a certain person focused on our taxes and not to the parents and the children. But let me get to my second question, which is something I've tried to Google and can't find. What are the years of the other schools? Like, when were they built?
So BOE School was built in 1926, Lindell was built in 1939. I believe West School was rebuilt in its current version in the 70s, maybe somebody can help, maybe 78.
You're right.
And Lido Elementary, I think, was built in the late 50s, maybe around 1960, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Lauren Moriarty, 509 Neptune Boulevard. So I think there was a lot of information regarding special education. So I think it would be helpful for parents if someone could clarify or explain CPSE services at Lido, because that's very different than our CSE services once we start in kindergarten. I also was under the impression that there was a parent information meeting that was back in January where parents were informed that the ICT would potentially be for kindergarten at East or West, because parents reached out to me personally when that happened. So I believe that there was communication that there wasn't going to be the ICT at Lido. Also, there was some misinformation and misinterpretation of the regs as it relates to least restricted environment, as it relates to gen ed classes, and what was implied was incorrect. I think that would be helpful if it was clarified also. I also think you guys have a phenomenal special ed administration and department, and I think that that should be acknowledged across the county. Your administrators are looked at as some of the smartest people in the room. So thank you guys for all that you do and for being that source of information for everyone.
And Lauren, I couldn't agree with you more. And look, when people are upset and they, for whatever reason, the communication didn't work. I think acknowledging that is important. Um, Beyond that, I don't always think it's fruitful to argue with people who are really angry. But you're right, there was a lot that was said tonight that is absolutely not true and unfair and really not fairly reflecting the high level of professionalism of our team. So I hope that people who are here know that.
Lisa.
Hi, I'm Jen Ong, 25 Orange Street. Something that I've been hearing a lot in a lot of meetings that I've been in is closing East has been talked about for so long, and as a lifetime Long Beach resident, I have heard, some of this, but as a parent here, I never heard it. And, I've been a parent here for 12 years, but, with kids in the district, only 8. And in lots of closed-door meetings, because I have been a PTA president, this is my 5th time over those 8 years, some for 2 years, some for just 1. So it hadn't been talked about to me, and even in the last meeting that was a budget meeting last year at East, was one of our board members had asked about the fear of East closing, and Michael had really reassured her, she was near tears thinking about if East could possibly be closed, and she was reassured that that was not something that was in talks, and then when the foundation needed money, is being returned and the whole promise and everything, we're not having to deal with that or worry about that and finding other money. It's hard to imagine that such a dire thing for the school could even be considered still. I've always kind of felt like East has been neglected, but we've never needed things that were flashy, just quality education and some of the greatest teachers in the district, in my opinion. And East was able to disprove my negative thoughts about ICT from previously teaching in the city for 8 years before I had my children. And when the model is done properly, theory practice, it really, truly is wonderful. And when the teachers are not properly trained and mentored, it can be a disruptive free-for-all environment where little learning is occurring, as my daughter experienced last year in 2nd grade. But when it's done right, it's absolutely wonderful. And so in the 3rd grade here at East, there's ICT, and in the 5th grade here, there are 2 ICTs. And there's 3 sections, only one is not ICT. And in the 7th grade now, there was ICT here, and in the 9th grade, there was ICT. But for some reason, the pre-K students who were born in 2017 who are now in 1st grade, and there are 3 sections here at East, there is no ICT here at East. So I was wondering, what made that ICT class end up at West, and if somehow, there might have been a reason, and maybe some thoughts had already been in the works about, having less ICT classes, because that, my daughter is 2015, my son is 2013, the 13, 15, but the 17s, even though there's 3 sections here of 1st grade, there is not an ICT here at, so I was just wondering how that one ended up at one.
Is that your only question?
No.
Okay, because your time is up.
Oh, okay. And then the only other thing was that I wanted to share how happy I was to hear your news today, that there would be a pre-K section here at East for next year, and that really, did give us something to smile about.
And just to address your question, we have for the last few years, the determination of where the ICT section goes is made on the basis of numbers of ICT, the staff needs, and just rotating from building to building. We've had ICT Leo. I don't know that we've had ICT recently in Liddell. We've, in the past years, also between East and West. And those decisions were made on the basis of, as I said, numbers and staffing. Some years we have enough for 1 kindergarten ICT, some years we have enough for 2. Last year there was 1, and the decision was made to put it at West for a variety of reasons that had nothing to do with anything. Now, clearly, this year, you didn't put one of these because of the conversations that people are having. But if those conversations go away, we can go back to putting in previous again.
Thank you. Okay, moving right along. Presentation to the superintendent.
First, can I ask the district clerk to read a walk-on resolution? Resolved that pursuant to section 913 of the education law, the employee named in executive session and referred to as employee A is hereby directed to appear for a medical examination in the office of Dr. Randall Solomon. And it is further resolved that Dr. Randall Solomon is hereby appointed school medical inspector pursuant to section 913 of the education law in order to evaluate said employee's ability to perform their duties as an employee of the district.
Make a motion. Second. Any discussion? Chelsea?
Yes.
Conway?
I'm abstaining.
Ento? Oh, yes. I vote.
I'd ask the board to consider items 1 and 2 together as amended.
Motion made.
Second.
Any discussion? Chelsea?
Yes.
Conway?
Yes.
Ento? Yes. I vote.
I'd ask the district clerk to please read the item number 3.
Item number 3, superintendent suspension appeal decision. Item A, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Long Beach City School District hereby denies the appeal of the suspension of a student identified in confidential attachment A dated March 18, 2024, and authorizes the board president to notify the parent of its decision in writing. Item B, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Long Beach City School District hereby denies the appeal of the suspension of a student identified in confidential attachment B dated March 19, 2024, and authorizes the board president to notify the parent of its decision in writing.
So that'd be 2 separate resolutions. The first resolution, I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Chelsea?
Yes.
Ms. Conway?
Yes.
Ento? Yes. And I vote yes. Second resolution, I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Chelsea?
Yes.
Ms. Conway?
Yes.
Ento? Yes. I vote.
I'd ask the board to consider items 4 through 9 together.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. DeVito, could you just please discuss as to why term?
Sure. So, if you
Please
take a
explain why the turf at the middle school needs to be fixed.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, the turf at the middle school was installed in 2010. Usually has a useful life of maybe 10, 12 years. Some people may even say 8. We've been lucky and very grateful to our staff by keeping it in great shape. Since it's been installed, I believe we do an annual GMAX testing, it's once a year. GMAX test that measures the durability or the safety of the actual turf, and it's always come back, in good numbers. But now, it's pushing 14 years, and it's been advised to us that we replace that turf field, that Veterans Field, because by the time we do that, it'll be approaching 15 years, and just for the safety of our student athletes, that we would like to have that turf.
Any other discussion? Ms. Chelsea?
Yes.
Ms. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ento? Yes. I vote yes.
Item number 10, requires no action. This is the second reading of the amended policy and facilities. And I ask the board to consider items 11 and 12.
You have a motion? Motion. Do a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Chelsea?
Yes.
Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Ento? Yes. I vote yes. Board of Education, any additional new old business?
Dr. Ryan? I just want to mention, I don't know if people know, we have wonderful teachers, but there's been one teacher, Miss Megan Grass, who's actually featured in the NYSERD newspaper for bringing her student research about plastics to life. It was a wonderful article in the nice newspaper, so it goes out to all of the districts, and it really showed the dedication and the hard work of Ms. Grass. So please extend to her our gratitude for that. That really makes learning real for our students. So thank you. And I just have one more question. We started a policy last year about ensuring that students go to class about absences. And parents have been getting a lot of letters about these absences. And the absences don't always state if they are a legal absence or an illegal absence. And there's been a lot of confusion as to students missing class, if it's legal, if it's not legal. Is there a way we could clarify that for parents, so the parents aren't screaming at their kids, why weren't you in class?
So I just want to make sure I understand your question. Legal and illegal absences are actually prescribed by the state. You can be absent for certain reasons, sick, group college visit, doctor appointment. I would assume that if parents are getting letters that their child has been absent from class without an excuse, they're also illegal.
No, you get the letter even if you send in an email.
Oh, is it a frequent absence letter?
Yeah. Even if you call or
So that's just, we're just trying to stay on top of absence numbers. And an absence is an absence in terms of, measuring chronic absenteeism. And we're trying to just let parents know as kids get up towards numbers that, can be really detrimental to their schooling. If you think parents need some definition about what the state considers legal and illegal, I can send you something.
Well, I can tell you as a parent who gets these letters, when my daughter was out sick with the flu, and I had written an email, and then I said, well, am I getting this letter again? I think there's a little bit more to that confusion. So if there's a way where the school tool could actually enable it where parents know these are the legal absences, but these were illegal, it would really help the parents.
Somebody blame it on AI like everything else?
We can, definitely can. And I do want to say, I also went to the Chicago performance. Down to the ticket, it was professionally done. I showed my husband who's the designer of the ticket, and he was amazed at it, how wonderfully done it was. The students were just amazing. The showcase was fantastic, so amazing. Thank you.
Any additional business?
Yes, I have some.
Okay, just, what Ann just said, I have to say I was at the production last Saturday night, and it was extraordinary. It was so professional. The sound was great, Mr. Rossi. But the children, their talent was showcased so beautifully. So that was one thing. The other thing is, if you haven't yet been to the Ivy Visual Arts Show in the lower commons area of the high school, please, it is a treat. And not only is the artwork beautiful, but do yourself a favor and read the artist statement that accompanies each student's work of art, because it explains their process and it explains what their motivation was, and it all kind of makes sense. And the kids did an exquisite job. Some of the work is actually a photograph of the original work because the work was so outstanding that it now hangs at the Heckscher Museum. So do yourself a favor and go see it. It's brilliant, and we thank Mr. Fox for all of his hard work and the wonderful work that he's doing with our kids in IB Visual Arts.
Anybody else?
Spoken by a former art teacher.
Any questions or comments from the public?
Hi again, Heather Casio, 630 Park. So I'm so happy that, the money is still here. So then I'm gonna ask this question. What have we decided as far as going forward to do with Twilight? I know that I've spoken to numerous people sitting up here, and I've gotten different answers as far as what Twilight is, what Twilight could be, what Twilight might be. So can you hear me better? Okay, so if you're, now that we have the money, what is it gonna be, and what is the game plan? Because I know we had different ideas as to what it was going to be. Number one. Number two, I know we're talking about math specifically. Just curious now that we're getting into the part where we do the scheduling for next year and all of Dr. Newman's, magical powers that she does to get the scheduling working. What math classes have we implemented for the 11th and 12th graders who have finished the curriculum, algebra, geometry, trigonometry, in order for them to have free math? And my last thing is, Ms. Conway, I don't know how to explain it to you without looking at it, but there is a way in school tools to see all that information. You can't do it on the app, but you could do it on the computer, and you go to a grid, and it gives you a listing, it's a grid, and it says action, and it says the reason why, and then it says excused or not excused, but I don't know how to say how to get it, but it's there, I promise. It is there.
Letters we get at home too.
Yes. Oh, and as far as the letters go, just so you know, it says like 8 absences or 7 absences. And I know you do that because the state says that you have to have X amount of classes for a quarter class, a half class, and so on and so forth. But we also have to take into account, not calling any specific teachers out, but if a child is a minute late and they've already submitted their attendance, they don't always go back in after and say, oh, right, I forgot Mary was late or John was late, and they came in from like guidance or the nurse's office. So I know I'm dealing with that with one of my child's teachers right now. So
let me just go through all of that. In defense of the absence letters, we have reduced our chronic absenteeism at the high school this year by 10%, which is huge.
that's wonderful.
So are we maybe doing a little overkill? Perhaps, but I think it's worth it to make sure that we
Oh,
get
no,
our
I
kids
think it's
to school.
fine. I just think that we need to make sure that our teachers, if the students are coming to
Yes,
class late, they remove the absence.
In terms of Twilight, rather, I can tell you what it's going to be next year and what our long-term plans are.
Wonderful.
Next year will look very much like it did this year. We're still in a transition because we need to look at bringing back some kind of daytime alternative program.
But I thought that's what Twilight is.
No, Twilight is a program that happens mostly after school from 3 to 6. Some of those students come in earlier and attend classes earlier as well. Then they do most of their credit recovery from 3 to 6.
And if I understand correctly, credit recovery is when a student cannot gain all of their credits, even by going to summer school for 2 years, in order, within a 2 year of graduation when they should have, correct?
What we need to do long-term is to design an alternative program. We'll always need credit recovery. We'll need, the opportunity for kids to make up classes they didn't do well. But increasingly, we're seeing kids who just cannot succeed in a traditional high school environment. For good reasons, in many cases, either stresses in their own lives or just their way of learning. It doesn't work in a school of 1,300 kids with a bell schedule and things that are still remnants of the 50s. We are looking at designing that space, but that's a longer term process. And we need space for it. We need to figure out how to staff it. And we need to talk about linking it to some kind of a mental health clinic or a wellness center. So it's a big conversation that we're going to be having over the course of the next year. We hope that maybe we can start to implement that following year. But Twilight has been really successful for some kids this year. We've been able to bring some kids back from out of district places who now go to school in our high school, as well as it's, that program. And we've been able to have some students who have struggled a lot during their first couple of years in high school, potentially on track to graduate.
So then I'm gonna ask you, what is the requirement to get into Twilight? Because I have spoken to numerous people up on the board of the table right here, and I have not gotten the same answer.
Yes, so there's not an easy answer to that. There's actually a committee that reviews, counselors recommend students for Twilight. There's a committee that reviews those applications and decides if the student is the right candidate for that program and makes that decision based on that. So I wouldn't want to give you, it has to be this or it has to be this.
Okay, is there any way, and I know you don't have it right now, but is there any way that you could get either emailed to me or next meeting or whatever, what the prerequisite is for Twilight? Because if you have a committee, and I thought that needs to cut you up, but if you have a committee that sits down and they discuss who should and who shouldn't, there has to be some sort of prerequisite to base it off of.
Yeah, sure, I can give you some of the general. But I just want to say to you, there are different pathways into Twilight, but I can email you some of those possibilities.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
The event you close this building, are you considering moving an alternative program into this space? No?
No, the reason we closed the alternative program for the Nike Center, which we operated up until about 5 years ago, was that it was so separate from the high school building that kids couldn't avail themselves of regular high school programs like woodshop and some of our CTE programs that are great for these kids. So really, the alternative program has to be on the high school ground.
Okay, thank you. And can somebody commit to helping me understand what the expected cost might be one time and ongoing in the event we do have to close the building in a year, specifically for things like boarding it, insurance increases in the event that the building isn't in use, things of that nature?
Off the top of my head.
No, yeah, if you could just commit to getting me like the.
Eventually, not tomorrow. I don't
That,
know.
you don't need to
those
get it to me
costs.
tomorrow. I
Yes,
just want to know that
those
we're
are the
thinking through these things
Yeah.
long term, right?
And those are the things that we'll discuss with the committee.
I see, so they haven't been.
You
thought
said a
of.
couple times, like, long-term, that's what we have here, we planned for long-term. So your insinuation over and over again that we don't plan for long-term, it's wearing you down a little bit, to be
And it's
honest.
not that,
That's why it's my
and
public
it's,
comment time.
and it's not that we haven't thought of them yet, it's that these things are outside our expertise. We have to bring people in to work that out. And as I've said at least 4 times today, we've not made a decision yet.
I didn't indicate
So-
that you did, I just wanted to know if you thought through the cost.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Announcements? Longest class of teachers association? Minister advisory, PPS?
No announcements.
LBSDA?
No answers.
Parent Teacher Association?
No announcement.
Thank you. I want to break protocol here. I want to give myself a spoon and applause for this meeting finally coming to an end. May I have a recommendation, may I have a motion to adjourn? May I have a second? All in favor? Have a wonderful holiday, everybody, whatever holiday you celebrate.